Warning! Today's story contains graphic descriptions of crime scenes, adult dialogue, and strong language. Viewer discretion is advised.
These stories will never, ever make sense to me. Ever.
Interesting. Suspish. Yep, suspish. You make good choices. You make good choices. You make good choices.
I will now get into the story, okay?
Hi friends, how are you today? I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. My name is Bailey Sarian, and today is Monday, which means it's Murder, Mystery, and Makeup Monday. Shana share, shana share, shana 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 shana. If you are new here, hi, my name is Bailey Sarian, and on Mondays I sit down and I talk about a true crime story that's been heavy on my noggin, and I do my makeup at the same time. If you're interested in true crime and you like makeup, I would highly suggest you hit that subscribe button because I'm here for you on Mondays. So today I do have to add a disclaimer. I would do my normal like warning, blah, 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 but like today's story is pretty intense. It's pretty brutal. It involves like everything. I don't really like to go into graphic detail in my stories. If you haven't noticed, I just kind of like vaguely mention things. It's just heavy. It's very, very heavy. I think a lot of times we just want to hear the story and not necessarily hear all the gruesome details. But with this story, it's almost like you can't avoid some of the details. So I apologize in advance for how intense it is, but it just kind of involves everything. This story has been highly recommended since day one, and I've been avoiding it just because I felt like, it's been talked about a million trillion times. Like, what else can I add to it? But, you know, I'm doing it for you guys because you've been asking. And honestly, I had this story so wrong. I thought I knew this story. Turns out I did not. Nay, nay. I think I've been rambling enough. If you're ever curious to know what I'm using, I do list it down in the description box. Other than that, I will shush my little mouth and let's get into today's story. Today we're talking about Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Carla was 17 years old and a high school student. She had a part-time job working at a local pet shop when she first met Paul Bernardo. At this time, Paul Bernardo was 23 years old and attending the University of Toronto, and he was studying to become an accountant. Now, it was said that he was doing well in school and he was on his way to graduate. October 17th, 1987, Carla was attending a pet food convention in Scarborough, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So Carla is working at this convention. They're doing like pet food stuff. Ooh. And as the night ended, she and a coworker went down to the hotel restaurant to grab some food. So the two of them, they're eating, they're sitting, you know, and then that's when Paul Bernardo walks into the restaurant. Now, Carla and Paul, they made eye contact like when he walked in, and they say, or it was said, that it was just an instant connection. Lust at first sight. Paul was over 6 feet tall. He was said to be an extremely good-looking guy. He was quite charming. He approached Carla, and the two started chatting it up. Now, the two of them, they just clicked. And the coworker that was with Carla was like, okay, well, I guess I'll be going now, you know, because she saw that they were just hitting it off, and she didn't want to get in the way of that, so she takes off. Now, Carla and Paul, they end up sitting there at the restaurant just talking about anything and everything for hours. And when the restaurant closed, that's when the two of them headed up to Carla's hotel room where they involved in some sexual relations. From my understanding, the age of consent in Canada is 16 years old, so not illegal, but she's still, you know, there's a big age difference and still fairly young, but okay. So Carla, you know, she was just believing that Paul was the man of her dreams, and the two made a very good-looking couple. Paul also told many of his friends that, you know, it was just a match made in heaven, that he had found his soulmate and how he would do anything for Carla, and Carla would do anything for him. Now, Carla, she was the oldest of 3 daughters, and she was well-liked in school. She was pretty. She was somewhat popular. And growing up, she lived in St. Catharines in the province of Ontario with her family. In school, it was said that Carla had many boyfriends and many boys interested in her. But when she met Paul, it was all she could talk about with her friends. You know, he was a much older man. He was in college. And like, she would just brag often to her friends about Paul. And they all just thought it was so cool. Now, Paul, he was the youngest of 3 children. It was said that he was a sweet kid and had a charming smile, but that he had a very difficult upbringing or a difficult childhood. His mother was verbally abusive towards him and his siblings. Then when Paul was 16, he found out that the man he called dad was not his biological father. Now, this was upsetting, and it broke all trust he had with his parents. I don't know, because I read different things. Some people say like it was an accident how he found out, and then some people say like his mom just randomly like said it when she was being verbally abusive towards him. Either way, it really affected him. So again, around the age of 16, that's when Paul began peeping through the windows of his female neighbors. He would watch them as they undressed, and he would do this like at any chance he could get. He would watch women through their open windows, so aka a peeping Tom. But as he got older, peeping through windows just wasn't cutting it for him anymore. And Paul said that his fantasies just started to become darker and darker, and he would dream about taking advantage or just taking control over women. But at that age, he wasn't acting on it just yet, but it was like starting to happen. So yay. So in September of 1983, that's when Paul started studying at the University of Toronto in Scarborough. Come on, Bailey, Scarborough. He's studying there. His friends and the people who knew him, they really liked him. He had, again, this charm about him. He can make friends with anyone. And overall, everyone just thought Paul's a great guy, you know? People wanted to be around him. Often, Paul was seen as the life of the party. And if Paul was at the party, then you knew it was going to be a good time. Paul did have a few girlfriends throughout college. Things would always start really well. It would be like this picture-perfect relationship. But then as time went on, the relationship, or at least their sexual relationship, would turn more abusive, violent, and sometimes controlling. And then at that point is when the women would break it off. In the spring of 1988, a sexual predator was roaming the streets in Scarborough. By May, there had been 7 different reports made by women to the local police sharing their attacks. The local police, they got on TV and they were just warning women who are watching, look, there's this predator, he's still out on the streets. They were telling women to not walk around at night alone, to not stay out late unless someone was with them, and just trying their best to warn everybody. Whoever this attacker was would grab women when they were leaving the bus stop at night and were walking alone. Some women were attacked when they were on their evening run in the park. They'd be approached from behind. The person would get them behind some bushes or kind of like in a little secluded area, and that's where they would be assaulted. His victims were forced to perform oral intercourse, sodomy, and were sometimes beaten afterwards. It was pretty intense and pretty freaking scary. The first reports that were made about this predator were just, not that this is like not as bad, it's still bad, but it was just about a man groping the victims. But then after about a year went by with still no suspect in custody, the attacks turned more violent. The media gave this person the name the Scarborough Rapist. Everybody in the city was just on high alert. Many statements were made from witnesses and the victims, but the police could not seem to get an accurate description of who this person was because the women had been attacked from behind. They really didn't get a clear shot of their attacker's face. All that they could tell was that whoever this guy was a guy, for starters. He was young, he was good looking, and he had light-colored hair. So that didn't really narrow it down too much, but that's what they had to work with. Now, as time went on, police were able to collect about 100 different DNA samples from potential suspects, but so far, nothing was a match. That's when the Toronto police had called in an FBI profiler to help create a profile of who this guy was. So the profiler analyzed the police reports and was able to link 4 more attacks to the Scarborough Rapist. I'm so sorry I keep butchering this name. I'm trying my best. But they linked 4 more attacks to this person, which brought the total to 11 victims. So the FBI analysts determined that the attacks were anger-based and sadistic in nature, which was like a rare combination, but whoever this person was very dangerous. Now, the profiler, they felt that this was a high-functioning, intelligent, psychopathic, sexually sadistic offender, and they believed that whoever it was lived in the area, most likely in a family household, had to be in their early 20s, and had to have violent relationships with women. So again, when Paul and Carla first met in the fall of 1987, there had already been 3 attacks linked to the Scarborough rapist. Now, Carla, she never suspected Paul could be the one linked to these crimes because their relationship seemed picture perfect. Paul would show up with flowers, and he would do this pretty often. He would give her gifts at every chance he could, and he just treated her really well, always thinking of Carla and just expressing how he wanted to just be with her forever and take care of her. Their relationship seemed to move quickly, but they were infatuated with one another, and they just couldn't keep their hands off of each other. So they had been dating for over 18 months, and Paul would drive over 80 miles to St. Catharines to visit Carla several times a week. Now, Carla's family, they loved Paul. It was said that they loved Paul. They thought he was a great catch. He was well educated. He was handsome. His life was on the right track. They didn't mind the age difference between the two. They just thought he was great. It sucks. This is a side note. I think a lot of us have this image of what we think these awful people look like, right? We just think of these monsters, these atrocious beings, right? Like, ugh. But we need to get out of our heads that these sickos look like monsters. They don't look like monsters. They're attractive, normal, you would never guess type of people. So, yeah, I don't know what to do with that information, though, because it sounded like there was no red flags with this guy. Well, yes, there was. I think they were being... Okay, we continue. In the spring of 1989, Carla graduated from high school and was really now trying to plan what the next chapter in her life was, you know? But when it came to Carla and Paul, like their relationship, it went from Carla telling her friends that, you know, everything was great and perfect to now Carla telling her friends that Paul was becoming verbally abusive towards her. But soon after they would have an argument, Carla would forgive Paul and apologize for his wrongdoings. He would maybe show up with a gift to show he was sorry, and then they would just move on. Yeah, so things just kind of were changing. In December of 1989, Paul and Carla, they went on a romantic getaway to the Niagara Falls, and that is where Paul got on one knee and proposed to Carla, and she said yes. So Carla went back home like all excited, you know, and told her parents like that they're engaged, and the parents were thrilled because now they're gonna have Paul like their son-in-law, and he was such a dream to them at that time. So Paul and Carla decided to set their wedding date for the spring of 1991. On May 29th, 1990, police released a sketch of what they believe the Scarborough rapist looked like to the public. Now, when the sketch was released, it was on the front pages of the papers, and so everybody was seeing it, right? So friends of Paul Bernardo were like, hey, have you seen this? Like, it kind of looks like Paul a little bit. If you squint, like, it looks like Paul. With this information, one of Paul's best friends actually contacted Toronto police and said that the drawing looked just like his friend Paul Bernardo, so they make a note of this. And then by November of 1990, so a couple months go by, there were several people who had contacted police saying that the sketch looked just like Paul Bernardo. So with this information, the police find Paul, they bring him in for questioning, and then they ask if they can get a DNA sample from him, which Paul willingly gave them. The DNA was sent over to be tested, but at this time, they had hundreds upon hundreds of DNA samples waiting to be tested. So it sat on a shelf with all the other ones, just waiting for its turn. A very, very unfortunate move. Now, it was said that at this time, DNA testing was still somewhat new and the technology was just a lot slower than it is today. So going through all of the DNA was going to take some time. And it did take some goddamn time. Way too much time. So after Paul was questioned, I don't know if he got freaked out or he didn't care, but he decided to move from Scarborough to St. Catharines to live with Carla and her family. Now, Carla and Paul thought it would be best to move in with Carla's family because then they could save money. And then once they had enough money, they could get a place of their own. But it was kind of funny because after Paul moved, all of a sudden, all the crimes stopped happening in Scarborough and seemed to pick up around St. Catharines. The family really did not think Paul could be related to these crimes in any way. They just really adored him, especially Carla's younger sister, 15-year-old Tammy. She looked up to Paul as like the older brother she never had. Paul was developing very dark urges towards Carla's younger sister, Tammy. It was said that, he would watch her undress from time to time, all creepily, when she was unaware. So Paul gave in to his urges and he told Carla that he really wanted something that Carla couldn't give him. And that thing was a virgin. He made Carla feel bad because, she wasn't a virgin, but the closest thing to Carla's virginity would be her younger sister, Tammy's virginity. So Paul pressured Carla to let him have her virginity. And Carla said that she wanted to please Paul or he would leave her. So she and Paul came up with a plan to drug her younger sister so Paul could have sex with her. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I told you, the story is disturbing, okay? Now this would be Carla's Christmas present to Paul. Okay. So December 23rd, 1990, Carla's family went to bed, but Carla and Paul, they asked Tammy to stay up and they could sneak some alcoholic beverages together while everyone was asleep. So Carla made the drinks for everybody. She would end up crushing up pills to put in Tammy's drink. Now at this time, Carla was working at a veterinarian clinic and she stole animal tranquilizers from there to use on Tammy. Now these pills would knock anyone out. And Carla thought like it would be best to use these to keep her sister asleep while Paul raped her. Carla also soaked a rag in halothane, which is a general anesthetic. She held it over her sister's face while Paul raped her. They also busted out a video camera and recorded the entire thing, for Christmas memories. Sick. Now, when Paul was done, he told Carla, it's your turn to assault your sister, which she did, and they also recorded on tape. Now, soon after, Tammy began to vomit and she started to choke. So Paul and Carla, they're kind of freaking out. They quickly dress her, they hide the camera, and then they call an ambulance. So when the paramedics arrive, Paul and Carla told them that they tried to revive Tammy after she passed out from drinking, but they don't know. Tammy ended up being taken to the hospital where she was later pronounced dead. So one of the doctors that was examining Tammy noticed a burn around her mouth where Carla was holding the halothane soaked rag. She had a burn around her mouth. Carla and Paul said that it was rug burn on her face when they pulled her off the bed onto the floor. They're trying to revive her. She got rug burn on her face. And that was a good enough answer for them. It was concluded that Tammy died of natural causes. At 15, she died of natural causes. So that makes sense. Carla's parents were devastated, but they honestly thought that her death was just a tragic accident. Teenagers, they just experiment with drugs and alcohol. So Tammy must have just been experimenting and she just took it too far. And it was nothing more than that, which is just awful. It's so sad. So a month goes by. Carla and Paul have saved enough money to get their own place. It's a 2-story home in Port Dalhousie. It's a small town near St. Catharines. It's a cute little house, too. Well, it's since been knocked down, but it was a cute house that they just ruined. So when the two moved into their own place, it's said that's when Paul's abuse really went up a notch. He would jokingly tell Carla that he was a Scarborough rapist and went from just being verbally abusive, which is still awful, to now physically abusive towards Carla. Now, when Carla would tell Paul that she was leaving him or she wanted to leave, he would threaten her, saying that he was going to go to police and tell them about her involvements in Tammy's death. And he had the videotapes to prove it. So if he was going to go down, she was going to go down too. Carla said that she felt like she really couldn't leave. June 15th, 1991, 2 weeks before Carla and Paul's wedding, Paul came home with a surprise for Carla. Now, you would think like flowers or something, but no, of course not. Paul came home with a 14-year-old girl named Leslie Mahaffey. Paul said that Leslie was in her own backyard and he pulled up in his car. He offered the girl a cigarette, which was back in his car. And when she approached the car, she got in and then he kidnapped her. Carla and Paul ended up holding her captive in their home, assaulting her repeatedly, all while recording the attacks on videotape. So after holding her captive for about 24 hours, the couple ended up strangling her, then dismembering her body. They took different parts of her body and they mixed it in with concrete blocks. Then they dumped it into the local lake, Lake Gibson. They dumped it in there. On July 29th, 1991, Carla and Paul, that's when they got married in a ceremony with over 100 friends and family around to celebrate their special day. But on that very same day, a fisherman came across some of the body parts of the 14-year-old victim, Leslie Mahaffey, in the lake. It was all over the news. People were just in the community, were just horrified. It is such a brutal, what the heck? So it was just everywhere. So over the next year, police looked for any clues into who the teenager's killer could be. And that's when they brought in the same FBI profiler from the Scarborough rapist case. Now, at the time, the FBI profiler, he said he had no reason to connect the two cases, which sounds absolutely ridiculous, but he didn't. So there was no connection being made between the two. And they didn't really have any leads either. So time went on and, Paul and Carla's life continued as newlyweds. But of course, Paul was just probably, I don't really know because, I don't know, but I'm assuming he was probably getting cocky because he's getting away with this and he's just wanting more. He's wanting more because he feels like he can get away with it because he is getting away with it. So Paul asked Carla to get in touch with some of her sister Tammy's best friends. He was like, hey, get them on the phone, invite them over, have them come over to the house where then we can drug them the same way that we did to Tammy. So over the next year, Carla actually was able to get several young women to go over to, not even young women, young girls to come over to the home and hang out where they would then drug and sexually assault them. Now, these victims would survive their attacks. They would wake up the next day having no memory of the night before or of the assaults. Some of these attacks were also caught on videotape, where they videotaped it, and it was kept in Paul's growing collection. April 16th, 1992, Paul and Carla went on a drive on an afternoon cruise, but only with the intention of bringing home a new sex slave to keep. That's when they spotted 15-year-old Kristen French. She was walking home from school. They drive past her and they pull into a church parking lot, it was a little ways ahead of her. And then they were just waiting for her to walk by. Carla was sitting in the passenger seat and she called out to Kristen asking hey, can you help us with directions? Because we're lost. And Carla was holding a map, so it seemed legit. She walks up to the car, and then that's when Kristen was shoved into the car, and then the couple drove off, heading back to their house. Now, it wasn't long until Kristen was reported missing, and then many witnesses came forward saying that they saw Kristen in the church parking lot. She was talking to a car that had two people inside of it. The witnesses also reported seeing them drive away in a beige Camaro. So now that they had a description of the car, police started searching heavily for a beige Camaro. Now, there were tons of billboards put up or posted around saying, "Have you seen this car? Have you seen this car?" And then on the billboard, there was a picture of the beige Camaro. But what they didn't know was that the eyewitness reports were actually incorrect. Paul actually drove a gold-colored Nissan, not a Camaro. I could see the confusion, how that could happen, but it still wasted a lot of time because they were looking for a beige Camaro, and, you know, it wasn't a Camaro, it was a Nissan. So the media started linking the disappearance of Kristen French to the murder of Leslie Mahaffey. They were just like, hey, these things got to be linked, right? Now, the FBI profiler, I'm laughing because, like, you just think he would have made this connection, but he didn't. The FBI profiler described the suspect as being a white male in their late 20s, probably had a history of sexually violent crimes, a history of domestic violence, someone who was most likely violent in their personal relationships. Kind of like the Scarborough rapist, but still, no connection was being made. Paul and Carla ended up keeping Kristen French for several days. They videotaped her assaults just to add to their growing collection. And then when Paul was satisfied, that's when they strangled and they killed her. On April 30th, 1992, Kristen's body was found more than 30 miles away in Burlington, and it was left in a ditch not far from the local cemetery. Just all around awful. And then in January of 1993, Paul ended up beating Carla up like so bad to the point that she went to the local emergency room to receive treatment. Paul had attacked her with a torch, and he ended up giving her 2 really bad like black eyes, a broken rib, and severe bruising. After 2 years of marriage, it was at this point that Carla decided to leave Paul. Now, around this same time, finally, Paul's DNA was being submitted and tested for the Scarborough rapist case. His DNA was positively identified as the man responsible for these attacks. So police finally are connecting the two. The murders in St. Catharines, they finally had their person. So before going straight to Paul, police actually, they reached out to Carla and they wanted to like create a wedge in the relationship, knowing that they could probably get more information from Carla. Now, Carla thought that she was being called into to be questioned about the domestic assault. But after the interview with police, Carla went back to her family home and she ended up breaking down. She confessed to everything. Carla was afraid that the police, they already knew what she was involved with, or at least the police were close to uncovering the truth. And she wanted to tell her parents before, you know, shit hit the fan. I'm sure her parents were like devastated. I mean, I don't even know. But her parents suggested that she hire a lawyer, which Carla ended up doing. So she told her lawyer that Paul was indeed the Scarborough rapist and also admitted to being involved in the 2 local murders and the death of her own sister. Carla would end up agreeing to testify against Paul in court in exchange for a reduced sentence for herself. So police end up agreeing to this, and then Carla sits down with police and gives them a full confession. The great debate around this story, well, there's a lot of great debates around this story, but one of them is like Carla's involvement, okay? She told police, you know, that she was a victim and stuff, and Paul like forced her to do this and whatnot. I saw clips of her being questioned by police, and let me just say, I think she's like new. She's a little smarter than she let on, because when she goes to like be questioned by police, first of all, she's dressed like a very innocent little schoolgirl, okay, which is fine, like that's fine, but that's not normally how she would dress, okay? So she was trying to play up this like I'm so innocent thing, and then she would answer all of her questions just very innocent. She'd be like, then he chopped her up and I just was so scared, yeah, so I was just there. Like, that's how she talks the whole time. Okay, so after Paul gets arrested, which I'm kind of jumping here, but Paul gets arrested. And then they ask Carla to go around their house and show like where Paul did things at, like describe in detail where things took place. I'm not kidding. She takes them into the bathroom, the police and all them. And she's like, this is where we put her, and then we bathed her in the bathtub, and then we dismembered her. And then she turns around to like where the kitchen, not the kitchen, the bathroom sink and all that's at. And she's like, can I ask you guys something? Where did all of my perfumes go? I had a bunch of perfume samples in here, and I'm just wondering where they all went, because the detectives took everything, and I don't know where my stuff went. And you're just like, girl, read the room. You just talked about dismembering a girl and you're wondering where your perfume's at. Like, it was just like, okay. And then she doesn't really show a lot of emotion, but then the moment she talks about one of the victims came over, Paul like took out really expensive champagne flutes. Is that what they're called? Like the glasses that you put in champagne. And you could just see all of a sudden her emotion comes out over these glasses that Paul decided to use to drug the girls with. So she was like, those glasses, they were from France and they were very expensive and we never used them. They were only for a special occasion and I was so mad. And like she's getting all worked up over Paul's choice of glasses that he used. And like that's one of the only times you see her like getting worked up over something. And you're like, okay, girl, this doesn't make, okay. And then like it just keeps happening, because then she's like describing again like what happened, and then she's like, can I ask you something? Do you know where all of my furniture went? Because they just came and they took all of the furniture and I'm just wondering where they went with my furniture. Can I get it back? Do you not understand like what's happening right now? Like, hello? And then another one, they were in like the basement. She sees a book on the ground. She goes, excuse me, can I have this book? Because my sister really wants it. She's been asking about this book and I'm just wondering if I could take this book. And that's like the only time that you get these little snippets of like, So Carla kept telling police that Paul forced her to participate in all of the attacks against her will. Carla also told police that there were videotapes in the house that would have everything they needed because everything was recorded. So she's like, you have to get those tapes, they're in the house. On February 17th, 1993, that's when Paul Bernardo was arrested. They began searching the home, their goal being to find those tapes because that was going to be their smoking gun. They would end up spending 71 days searching the home, but the police could not locate these videotapes, which Carla claimed showed the attacks. Now, without these tapes, they had no direct evidence that linked Paul to the crimes. So they arranged the plea agreement with Carla because they're heavily relying on her to give her testimony. That's what's going to put Paul behind bars. And in exchange, Carla would receive a reduced sentence for her involvement, which this deal was kept secret from the public, and that caused a whole upset. On June 28th, 1993, Carla appeared in court for her involvement with the crimes, and the court put a publication ban on her trial, which was very unlikely of the courts to do. This caused a huge upset with the media, and the public was angered because their right to know was being denied. And like this was a really, really big case, so people are just trying to figure out what happened. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but from my understanding, it was the U.S. who gave them the title the Ken and Barbie killers. Like they would, you know, because of their good looks. Like, oh my God, they're so good looking. How could they be killers? So Carla was convicted on manslaughter charges, and she ended up receiving a 12-year sentence, which again caused a lot of upset. The plea agreement was said to be kept a secret in order to make sure that Paul had a fair trial. So Carla was sent to prison, and then on August 2nd, 1993, she ended up filing for divorce from Paul. On May 18th, 1995, Paul's trial began. Paul pleaded not guilty on 9 charges in connections with the deaths of Leslie and Kristen, including kidnapping, unlawful confinement, aggravated sexual assault, and murder. The prosecutors had presented new evidence during trial that was not known about. They ended up finding the videotapes in the couple's home. I know, it was kind of like a surprise. I don't know where they found it or like where, I don't know. They found it though. I think that's great. Now, this was the first time that they had direct evidence against Paul, but also Carla as well. Now, these tapes revealed a completely different version of events, and they felt that Carla had completely misled authorities because on the tapes, Carla was seen fully participating in the attacks. Had the tapes surfaced sooner or earlier, it most likely would have affected her plea deal. So Paul's team was like, shit, like they got the tapes, you know, but they're like, yeah, Paul's on the tapes, but they never show him murdering anyone, you know? Paul instead was like, it wasn't me who murdered them. I was not the killer. It was actually Carla who murdered the victims. On June 19th, 1995, Carla testified against Paul, and that's where she stated that she was also a victim to Paul, and he was the mastermind behind it all. When Carla was asked about the videotapes, she said that she suffered from battered spouse syndrome, and that was her reasoning. Many believe that, like, yes, she was indeed abused by Paul, but she could not be classified as a person suffering from battered spouse syndrome. When talking about battered spouse syndrome, they're mainly talking about people who are like suffering from tremendous psychological abuse, but these tapes showed that Carla was more of an accomplice in the horrible crimes versus a victim. The judge allowed the jurors to watch the videotapes and only allowed the public to listen to them but not view it. They didn't want to put the family through more grief by viewing these tapes because of just how awful they were. Paul's trial lasted months. At the end of it, the jury deliberated for 5 hours. And then on September 1st, 1995, 31-year-old Paul Bernardo was found guilty of all 9 charges against him, including the 2 murders. Paul was sentenced to life in prison. While Paul is sitting in prison, he also confessed to 14 more sexual assaults of women in the Scarborough area, and the judge declared him just a dangerous offender, which will most likely keep him in prison without the chance of parole for the rest of his life. Because he does have a possibility of parole after like 25 years, I believe, but let's hope that he does not get out because it sounds like he would do it again. Like, come on. So the great debate around this case was if Carla got off way too easily. Many believe that Carla was just as sick, if not more sick, than Paul was. Now, whatever was on these tapes showed a completely different side of Carla, but also just a different story. I didn't see them. I don't want to see them, so I didn't look it up. But just based off of what I was hearing from interviews with the police department and stuff and the jurors, it was really bad. Carla seemed thrilled to be there. Do you know what I'm saying? Carla's plea deal became known as one of the worst in Canadian history. The following year, an investigation was done on the investigation into Paul and Carla's case as to why they fell through the cracks and how this could be prevented in the future. I guess since then, they have tried to implement a new system for tracking serial predators, improving communication between police departments, and hoping to never have a case like this go unsolved for as long as it did. So then, on July 4th, 2005, 35-year-old Carla was released from prison, having served just 12 years behind bars. Now, Carla couldn't go back to St. Catharines, okay? She was not welcome there. So instead, she moved to Montreal and started a new life there. Carla said that she still had nightmares about the girls and felt great remorse for what she did. And then she also went to the courts in hopes to get a name change, but she was denied the right to changing her name because she is a public figure. So she wasn't allowed to do that. So over the years, she remarried and she went on to have 3 kids of her own. From what I could find, as of 2020, it was said that she no longer lives with her children or husband. And there was a period of time where she was like a volunteer at a primary school. And like that caused obviously a lot of outrage because she was working with kids or young adults and like nobody did a background check and maybe thought that's not a good fit. It seems like wherever she goes, she's just not welcome anywhere she goes. I mean, for good reason. I personally believe that Carla, yeah, she should have been locked up for a lot longer. Okay? And like even, because, okay, so I went to the Museum of Death in Los Angeles and they have their personal photos there on display. You can go there and, oh, it's just, be prepared. You go there and they have all the photos. And this was like before I really even knew much about the case, but this image has been burned into my brain because it's Carla like smiling all big and she's like holding up someone's head. She's like, she just was excited. But yeah, I think she should have spent a lot more time behind bars. I mean, she killed her own damn sister. What the hell? I forgot about that. Yeah, girl, no. No. Out. Go. And that, my friends, is the awful story about Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Thank you for recommending this awful story. Are you happy? I would love to hear your guys' thoughts down below. Do you think that Carla should be in prison for a lot longer? That's a hot debate. But other than that, let me know who you want me to talk about next week down in the comment section, because I do read my comments. Love and appreciate you guys. I hope you have a great day. You make good choices, and I'll be seeing you guys later. Bye. Let's talk about Louise. Okay, Louise. She was born September 30th, 1880. Look, the crazy ones were in like the 1800s, early 1900s. I don't know what it was. Something was in the water. She was born in Bienville, Louisiana. Did I say that right? I probably did that. Bienville, Louisiana. Okay. And her father was super wealthy. Oh, yes. Very wealthy man. He ran a newspaper company. And honestly, it was very clear to Louise that she came from a very privileged life. At the age of 15, she would go on to attend a private school in New Orleans. New Orleans. Do you remember? A couple videos ago, I said New Orleans. I got roasted in the comments. I get it. So she goes to a private school, New Orleans. But she wouldn't last there too long because she was expelled. She got caught stealing from her classmates. And then the final nail in the coffin was when she was caught engaging in some sexual behavior with other boys in the school, you know. So she got kicked the heck out. There's really not much information about her upbringing. Like I was trying to figure out where her mom was at and stuff. And again, because it's such an old story, it's like, good luck. So some of the details are missing, but you'll get it. It's still a very interesting one. So she grows up, very privileged family, wealthy, great. And then in 1903, Louise, she marries her husband, her first husband. His name is Henry Bosley, and he worked as a traveling salesman. Louise seemed to like the fact that Henry was away all the time, you know, because he's a traveling salesman, so he's like not home. And Louise liked that because while he was away, Louise did indeed play, if you know what I mean. She was having many affairs. It's not very nice, Louise. Anyway, so after 4 years of marriage, Henry comes home one day from working. Comes home early. He opens up the door, and what does he find? Louise is inside with another man. He's absolutely devastated. Like, he's heartbroken over this. And because he walked in on Louise, the love of his life, cheating on him, he fell into like a really deep depression, okay? And then soon after, he ended up committing suicide. Yes, it's rough in the first 5 minutes, I know. After her husband's death, Louise decides to move to Shreveport, Louisiana. Another part of Louisiana. So she moves and she's in need of a job, right? She's got bills to pay. She's new in town. Great. So she starts looking around for a job. And Louise figured the easiest job for her, I'm not saying this is an easy job, she felt like it was an easy job for her, was to become like a high-class sex worker. But she could make even more money, extra money on top of that, by simply stealing some money from her clients when they weren't looking. So she would, you know, when they were like doing something else, she was sneaking off and like taking some money from them. And Louise, she pulled these tricks for about 2 years, but decided she was over it. And then in 1911, Louise moved to Boston, where she wanted to change her name for some reason. She needed to rebrand, and she changed her name to Louise M. gold. Oh my gosh, I messed up. Oh dear. Sometimes you mess up your eyeliner and that's okay. That's okay. I'm working with it, not against it. Okay, moving on. Louise, when she's in Boston, she gets a new scam going. And she starts telling people that she's a 19-year-old heiress from Dallas, Texas, who has been confined to a convent by her family. And she had run away. She had escaped. I mean, there's no internet back then or anything, right? So it's like, yeah, sure, you are? Whoa, you know? I know we don't know too much about her upbringing, but we know that wasn't true. It was fake. That was a lie. So Louise is kind of spinning this web of lies while mixing and mingling with the wealthier families of Boston. Now, it's said that Louise was a very beautiful woman and she was very charming. It's not long before she manages to convince one of these wealthy families to take her in, like almost adopting her. Very bizarre, but okay. But it's also not long before Louise is up to her old tricks again, okay? She decided she was going to start to scam the family. She would run up large bills at some of the most expensive stores in Boston. And she was also stealing money, not only from the family she was staying with, but also their friends and their employees. This is like the olden days where you could be like, put it on the card, put it on the Johnson account, you know, and it's like you could just pay later or something. No one would let you do that now, but at this time that was a thing. So she was doing that, like put it on the tab. And yeah, she was running up a big bill, not having to pay anything. Now, it's not clear how, but someone catches on to her lies and like what she's really been up to. Okay, so they tell the family that she's been staying with, hey, she's lying to you. She doesn't come from a wealthy family. She's been stealing money and she's been running up a bill. I don't know, but I'm assuming it was something like that, you know? Well, again, this is the olden days, 1911 at the time, and the wealthy family she was staying with was super embarrassed that they were duped in the first place. Their first thought was if anybody finds out, they would suffer greatly from public embarrassment. Okay, and that's like the most important thing. Public embarrassment. So they don't want that. Okay. So the family's like, we're not going to press charges, but they tell Louise, if you go away, okay, if you promise to leave town, we won't press any charges. And she's like, okay, promise? I mean, what a deal. No lessons to be learned there. Sounds great. So Louise goes to Waco, Texas, where she meets right away a wealthy oil boss named Joe Apple. Now, Joe loves diamonds. Oh, yes. He has diamonds on everything. Rings, belt buckles, even the buttons on his shirt had diamonds on them. And he loved to flaunt his wealth to the peasants with their basic belts and shirts, you know? So he's just a douche, a rich douche. Well, Louise sees the diamonds and she's like, hell yeah, sign me up. She goes straight to him, beeline for that guy. And I don't know what her deal is, but she's able to get a man very easily. And things between Joe and Louise, they get pretty hot and heavy pretty damn quickly, okay? But the relationship itself is pretty short-lived. 1 week after they met, Joe was found dead. His cause of death, he was shot. But not only that, all of his diamond jewelry was missing. Now, many had seen Joe and Louise together, so naturally, Louise was arrested. She was arrested for the crime, and she went all the way to trial for the crime because it was believed she was the murderer. But again, people just really seemed to enjoy, just like Louise. I don't freaking know, man. She sat on the stand and told the jury that Joe had tried to rape her, so she killed him in self-defense. She had no diamonds in her possession, so the jury, they side with her. It was self-defense, and they find her not guilty, and she's released. Now, that's all fine and dandy, you know, because, like, that does happen, and self-defense is important, but as we go on in this story, you'll start to question if that's true or not, you know? So Louise decides that was a pretty close call. I mean, she went all the way to court. She almost got in trouble for murder. She needs to move again and rebrand herself because now people know her in town as, you know, this questionable woman. So in 1913, she picks up and she moves again. This time she goes to Dallas, Texas. Look, I don't know how she did it, but she did. She would find a rich guy on day one. It was literally weeks after being there, she meets and marries a man also named Henry. No. His name's Harry. Sorry, his name's Harry. He works as a night clerk at a hotel called St. George. In the 1930s, St. George would get like a $100,000 makeover. It was a really big deal. And the hotel would be renamed as Hotel Whitmore. One night, Harry is working his night shift at the hotel when a robbery happened. There was $20,000 worth of jewels stolen out of the hotel's safe. He tells Louise, like, there's been a robbery, like all these jewels are missing. And Louise is like, oh my God, that's crazy. You know? And so he calls up the police, and the police come and they interrogate Harry. But he's eventually cleared of any involvement with the missing jewelry because he doesn't have them. Investigators then look into Louise, right? Because she's been hanging with Henry, like maybe something's up with her. So they look into her thinking maybe she did it. But at the end of the day, there was zero evidence linking her to the crime, and none of them had the jewels in their possession. So well, it couldn't have been them. Now, sadly, even though they had both been cleared by police, Harry allegedly wasn't able to like really move past the embarrassment of being accused of stealing from the hotel. And it was said he fell into a major deep depression, leading him to commit suicide. There's a lot of speculation that Harry did not actually commit suicide. Rumors were going around that Louise actually was the one who pulled the trigger. But again, there was no evidence to actually prove that this was true. So it was just all speculation and rumors. But ain't that a little fishy? That's 3 boyfriends who are dead. So now Louise is done with Texas and she decides that she's going to move to Denver, Colorado in 1915. And this, once again, she meets and marries a salesman. His name is Richard Pete. She's like Cordelia. Remember Cordelia in that other episode I talked about? Not long ago, Cordelia. Louise is kind of similar to her. She has like beer-flavored nipples or something. I don't know. People just freaking fall for her. It's wild. Anyway, so they get married, these two. They get married and they go on and they have a daughter named Frances Ann. They call her Betty for short. And this happens about a year after they meet. So like clockwork, Louise, she seems to struggle with married life, which leads to the couple to be constantly fighting, disagreeing about stuff. And then 4 years later, in 1920, the two decide it's best to separate. So they do. Louise seems to only have about a 4-year threshold of people and places because she then leaves her husband and daughter, and then she moves to Los Angeles, California. I don't know how she's doing it. I really don't. Okay, great. So she moves to Los Angeles. Wow. And guess what? You probably guessed right. She meets a guy named Jacob Denton, who was like a recent widower, and he had a teenage daughter. Leaving her own daughter to be a mother to someone else's child, it didn't seem to be Louise's cup of tea, you know? She's like, damn it, no. But it turns out Jacob is also a mining engineer who made millions before he retired. So she's like, meh, I'll give it a whirl. You know, she's like, whatever. She just sees dollar signs. Their meet-cute love story starts when Louise inquires about a 14-room mansion she is hoping to rent. And what she wants a 14-room mansion for, we may never know, but she does. And Jacob, the guy, he's the one who's renting it. And he's asking $350 a month to rent his 14-bedroom mansion. And Louise is able to sweet talk him all the way down to $75 a month. First of all, $350 a month for a 14-room mansion in Los Angeles, a tragedy on its own. What the hell? Cannot even come close to relating, Louise. $350 for a 14-room mansion? I know that was a lot to them back then, but still. Anyways, so Louise sweet talks him. She gets him down to $75. Great. Louise moves in on May 26th. And then she and Jacob start hooking up. It wasn't long until Louise, she proposes marriage to Jacob, but he turns her down, saying that he was going out of town for a month and like it just wasn't going to work out. Wasn't in his schedule. And when Louise hears this, she is quite upset. I mean, she always gets her way. I mean, nobody has told her no so far, you know? So she's just really unsure what to do with these new emotions. No? Huh? You know? So now during this time, rumors are circulating around town as to what role Louise plays in Jacob's life. Is she really his live-in girlfriend, like Louise claims she is? Is she the housekeeper? Is she the tenant? She never signed a lease, so who is she? You know, people are just talking, gossiping, trying to figure out who this lady was living in this big old mansion and where she came from. Well, a couple days after Louise's proposal, Jacob just poof, vanishes, disappears, gone. Now, he was supposed to go out of town for a month, but no one can confirm if he did indeed actually go. So Louise tells the neighbors that, oh yeah, he went away for the month. Yes, I saw him off. Don't worry, like, he's just gone for business. Calm down, girl. And, like, don't worry about it. Because they were kind of asking, like, where is he? It's been a while. And then some time goes on, things carry on, but, you know, people deep down are having that funny feeling that something's not right with Louise. So a few days later, Louise hires a gardener to come out to the house and spruce it up a bit, you know? So she brings a gardener in and she's like, hey, can you come into the house and unload a bunch of dirt into the basement of the house? Now the gardener is like, that's a very odd request. What exactly is the dirt for in the basement, you know? And Louise tells him that she's planning on growing Jacob's favorite kind of mushrooms down there as a surprise. So when he comes home, he's going to be like, oh my God, mushrooms in my house. Just what I always wanted, you know? Super strange, but she has money and these gardeners are here to work. So it's like, meh, sure, we'll do it. Makes enough sense. So they load in a bunch of dirt into the basement. And she's going to grow some mushrooms, I guess. Then on June 5th, Louise shows up to the local bank with a permission slip from Jacob to withdraw $300 from his bank account, and it's also giving her access to his safety deposit box. Now, the bank teller noticed that Jacob's signature, it looked a little suspicious. It didn't look so right, you know? So she's kind of like, oh, this is off. Let me say something. So she points it out to Louise, like, you know, the signature doesn't, girl, it's fake, you know? And Louise is, she just gives the teller some crazy story about how she had to help Jacob write his signature with his left hand because his right arm had to be amputated after he got in an argument with a mysterious and very angry, quote, Spanish-looking woman who shot him. Super believable. Super believable. She's like, yeah, that's what happened. This is a real story. That's what's even better about this whole nonsense. And the teller, I don't know, I guess she's like, oh, wow, that must like that does happen, I hear. And she gives Louise access to the money and the safety deposit box. She gets away with everything. But Louise seems to be having a hard time keeping her story straight. Maybe she just doesn't give a rat's ass. I don't really know. But she retells the story again when she comes back to the bank at a later time. But this time saying that the woman cut off his arm and his leg, but this time with a sword. Very dramatic situation. She then said that Jacob was so embarrassed by his amputated arm, not the leg though, but just the arm, that he had locked himself up in the house and will only speak to her and her only. So as the weeks go by, Jacob's friends, neighbors, and business associates, they start worrying and they're questioning Louise a bit. They're pushing a little bit harder. They're like, where's Jacob? We haven't seen him. Meow, meow, meow. And Louise, she just always had an answer. She would tell him like, oh, his business trip got extended. I'm sure he'll be back soon. Like, don't worry about him. He's totally okay. Depending on who was asking, her story would change. Sometimes he lost an arm. Sometimes he didn't. It just, whatever. You know, she's freeballing it. I think I'm using that term correctly. Freeballing it. I think I went a little crazy with the blush. You would think I don't know how to do makeup today. You really would. Anyway, while Jacob was out of town, air quotes, Louise seemed to be quite happy running the show. She was spending his money, driving his Cadillac, renting out the rooms in his mansion, and just in turn, she was pocketing the rent money. Smart. I'll give her that. She bought 2 very expensive dresses at a local high-end department store under Jacob's name while claiming to be his wife. She also pawned a bunch of his jewelry and more valuable possessions. I mean, she is doing the most. And she wasn't worried about a damn thing. She was like doing it so confidently and very openly. There was no secret, you know? This girl's bold. I think because she knows she could just pick up and leave again. She's not worried about it. Well, Louise found out that Jacob had some rental properties out in Phoenix, Arizona, and she's able to contact the tenants, and she convinces them to start making their rent checks out to her instead of Jacob. Wow, you know? She was really doing it. She was professional scammer. Okay, so you know how I mentioned earlier that Jacob had a teenage daughter? Okay, well, if you don't remember, look, he had a teenage daughter. And while all of this was happening, Louise running around stealing money and just being a shitty person, Jacob's daughter knows something is up with this shady woman. Now, Jacob's daughter, she was living with Louise in the house, but my guess is that it's a 14-bedroom mansion, so like you probably really don't have to interact with one another if your house is that big. That's what I'm imagining, right? She's probably like on the left wing and you're on the right wing and you never really see each other unless you have to. So that's why I'm thinking she wasn't like so concerned with the daughter. I don't know. I'm really guessing. But eventually the daughter really starts to question Louise. I mean, her father has been missing or gone for far too long by this point. So she's like, you know what? I'm not getting any straight answers from this Louise woman. Let me hire a lawyer in hopes to help find my father. So a lawyer comes out and questions Louise, like, you know, where's Jacob? And she just kind of blows him off, saying that she really just doesn't know. He's on a business trip, but whatever. But she does agree to give the lawyer Jacob's financial and business documents as soon as she can. It might be a few days until she can gather that information, but she'll hand that over to make sure there wasn't any unusual activity going on, you know? Hopefully track where he's at. She's like, yeah, I'll get that right over. At this point, Louise had rented out every room in the mansion, and she decides this is her cue to go. Okay, she's like, well, my time has expired here. And she packs up her stuff and she ends up going back to Denver, Colorado. What Louise does is she goes crying back to her ex-husband, Richard, the one that's taking care of the baby. Yeah, she goes crying back to him, like, take me back. I want to be a family again. I miss you, which is so messed up. And Richard is like, dude, I just been taking care of our daughter for the last 4 months and trying to figure it out. And now you just want to come waltzing right back in. Okay. So, you know, she's a good talker or something. And she's like, okay, you can come back, you know, let's be a family again. She wants to be a wife now. But back at the Los Angeles mansion, now that Louise is gone, Jacob's daughter, she decides that she is going to search the house up and down and search for any type of clues, just anything, okay, evidence, something that will help her figure out what the heck just happened. So the daughter is searching the house, and on September 23rd, 1920, she finds Jacob's, or her father's, decomposing body. He's tied up in like a number of cords, he's wrapped up in blankets, and he's buried in the basement. But he's buried like in the basement under some stairs. I couldn't figure out if it was like in the dirt. Maybe the dirt was preventing people from going down there because he wasn't necessarily in the dirt. He was under the stairs, from my understanding. Either way, he was dead. Okay, so the autopsy report determined that Jacob was shot in the head and strangled. So Louise is obviously their #1 suspect. So the police try and track her down. They go out to Denver to question her. So they knock on Louise's door and they're asking her, hey, did you have anything to do with Jacob's death? And she has a number of theories as what might have happened to him. One of them involved a mysterious Spanish woman who shot Jacob, causing his arm to be amputated. It must have been her. But no one was buying that theory anymore because Jacob's body still had his arms and his legs attached. So, no. And then Louise tries to change her story again, this time claiming that Jacob isn't dead at all, that the body they found inside the mansion, oh nay, that was not him. That was a double who Jacob had killed himself. She's like playing Clue or something. I don't know. She thinks this is a murder mystery dinner. Now, at first when I was researching this, I was like, let me guess. They believed her, right? Because like everyone seems to believe her. Anyway, so police are like, what do you mean double? Like, what do you mean? Does he have a twin or a lookalike or something? And Louise, she had no answer for that specific question of theirs. So with that being said, they placed her under arrest for first-degree murder and dragged her ass back to LA. Now here's where you probably think that the story's gonna end. No, it does not. It goes on and on and on. It goes on and on and on. But okay, so Louise, she does get arrested and she does get put on trial for the murder of Jacob Denton, which starts in January of 1921. And it was the hot gossip at the time. There was thousands of people lining up on the daily to watch Louise walk into the courthouse and like see what she looked like and what she was wearing and stuff. Because they were interested. They were super interested. Newspapers were reporting on this trial and they were selling like crazy. So the media was loving it because it was selling newspapers. There was just something about Louise that had many people captivated. Anywho, so the trial, it would only last for a few weeks. And then in February of 1921, Louise, she was convicted of first-degree murder and she was sentenced to life in prison. Now, great, beautiful. We love that. She deserves it. But there's more to the story, okay? Let me do my lip liner really quick. So during her trial and her first 2 years of her life sentence, Louise's husband, remember him, Richard? He stayed super loyal and supportive. He pretty much was the only one who believed that she was innocent. I mean, she wasn't, but she believed that she was. Louise, she told him straight up, listen, you should move on, okay? I've been convicted of murder. You can be free to divorce me and remarry. Like, find yourself a nice woman. You deserve it. This is what she's telling Richard. And now this was heartbreaking to him. But he agreed, and he was like, fine, I'll get a divorce, but he tells Louise that he was going to wait forever for her because he knew one day she's probably going to get released and then they could be together again. There was just no other woman out there for him. And Louise is like, yeah. Move or lose it, bud. Now, something super strange happens, let me tell you, because as soon as the two of them divorced, Louise, she stopped answering Richard's letters and she refused to see him when he came to visit her at prison. Well, first of all, Louise claimed that poor Richard felt so guilty over her conviction and the fact that they're not together that he committed suicide. I was trying to figure this one out because we know that Louise didn't do it because she was in jail. Great, right? So my thought was like, maybe she put someone up to it, but like, why would she, you know? I was like, well, maybe he did commit suicide. But what are the odds that every freaking ex of yours commit suicide? Like, what is this? You know, this lady is deadly. They are dropping. I don't get it. I don't know, but maybe he did. And then I feel bad because I'm like, yeah. Okay, so Louise, she's using this to her advantage. She's telling others in jail that no man can resist her charm. And she's just kind of using this to brag about it. All of their husbands' deaths, I guess. I guess maybe people are impressed by it. I don't really know. Well, get this. So Louise started her sentence at San Quentin State Prison before being transferred to like a women's institution in California. It wasn't far, but she was there for a while and she plays the role of like this perfect prisoner. She's like, oh my God, hi, I'm so happy to be here. Like using her Southern charm to make those around her just think she's such a splendid little lady. She maintained the prison's flower garden. She worked as a dental assistant and even wrote for the prison newspaper. Now she would end up serving 18 years before Louise was paroled for good behavior in 1939. Yeah, she's paroled for good behavior at the age of 59. So she gets out. Okay, so there was this woman named Jessie Marcy. She was like lobbying for Louise's release. When Louise was released, well, she would go into Jessie's custody. But the deal was that Louise was going to be Jessie's live-in housekeeper, okay? I don't know the connection between the two, but it doesn't matter because get this. It's like a sweet deal, but Jessie ends up dying of natural causes, like not even a week after Louise is released. I think she's aqua tofana-ing everyone's ass. She has to be. How is she doing this? Natural causes? Where? Either she is killing them or people just are dropping like flies around her. I mean, that's not a coincidence. Come on. Louise then, she moves in with her probation officer. Her name is Emily. So Emily takes her in and Louise was like, okay, I'll work as your housekeeper and also as your nurse and take care of her because she's a little bit older. So this arrangement, it didn't last long because Emily died of a freaking heart attack in 1943. I mean, come on. Why is everyone who comes in contact with this woman just dropping dead? It's so bizarre. For some reason, police never looked further into these deaths. Like, since they died of natural causes, there wasn't much to look into. But it's also because, this is the thought here, that the local police, they didn't look into Louise's like past or Louise at all because they had no idea that she was on parole in the first place. Because when she was released from prison, Louise changed her name to Anna Lee. Yeah, she changed her name to Anna Lee. Lordy, lordy, lordy. Louise just has everything all figured out. She's one step ahead. So, after Emily died, Louise found another living arrangement for herself. This time it was with an old prison friend named Margaret and her husband, Arthur Logan. Now, Margaret and Louise were good friends and she always thought Louise was innocent in the first place. Margaret did. She thought Louise was innocent, just the sweetest little lady. So when she heard that she was in trouble, she wanted to help her out. So she invites Louise to come live with her. She was like, hey, if you move in with me, can you be my live-in housekeeper in trade, you know? But also, if she could be a nurse to Arthur, who was suffering from dementia. So she's like, can you be his nurse? I'm sure you can imagine where this is gonna go. But as we have learned, something is off with this woman, and Louise starts telling neighbors these rumors. She's like, hey, Arthur, yeah, he goes into terrible fits of rage, and he beats his wife, Margaret, every night. She's telling everyone this. And she's telling them this rumor. And I don't know why. Well, it'll make sense later. But she's telling everyone this and they're like, oh my God, like that sounds so awful. And Louise is telling the neighbors, like, don't mention it to them or Margaret because like it'll just really upset them. So they're believing it. They're like, oh my gosh, poor Margaret is just in an abusive relationship. Okay, so once again, in June of 1944, Margaret disappears. Nobody has seen her. Nobody has any clue where she went. Nothing. 3 days after Margaret goes missing, Louise decides to put Arthur in a state hospital. Oh yeah, she wheels him right off to the state hospital. I think this woman is the actual devil. Louise moves herself full-time into the house. My house now. I cannot believe her. So of course the neighbors are asking what happened to Margaret and Arthur. And Louise is telling them like, oh my God, you guys, Arthur attacked Margaret, bit off her nose, and she's so disfigured that she's like too embarrassed to come outside. That's what she tells them. The cycle continues. But okay, look, right before Margaret went missing, Louise had met a new guy. He's a banker. His name was Lee, and she met him and they went on to get married. You know how she does it. So she left out that tiny detail about being in jail for murder though. So he really had no idea. Plus, he thought her name was Anna. So they've been dating, Margaret goes missing, and Lee had met Margaret once before and he's asking Louise like, hey, what happened to Margaret? Like it's been a while, where's she been? You know, just asking, just genuinely asking. So Louise repeats the same story that she's been feeding to the neighbors, but adds that after the attack, Margaret went into isolation in preparation for plastic surgery on her nose. Now it's weird because Lee and Louise are actually living inside of Margaret and Arthur's home for about 6 months, and he doesn't further wonder like what the hell is going on, where is Margaret? Like he doesn't know or question, or I don't. Now, it's believed that he didn't question anything like what was going on because Louise was forging checks and spending Margaret and Arthur's money on herself and her new hubby, Lee. Like, you want anything? I'll buy it for you. So maybe that's why he didn't care too much and didn't keep asking. I don't know, but that's what it's believed to be true. So the spending spree is cut short when Arthur dies in December of 1944, and the bank notices that there are still checks being cashed with his forged signature, and that doesn't make sense because Arthur passed away. So how is a dead guy signing checks, right? So the bank teller calls up the police, who naturally head over to where Margaret and Arthur's house, where Louise and Lee are living, and they're investigating. They're just doing their questioning. They're like, hey, you know, we got a call, you're forging some checks, whatever. And they're just getting a funny feeling about the couple, but no arrest was made. I think Louise was telling the police it must be Margaret, but Margaret's out of town. So the police was like, okay, we'll come back in a couple of weeks when Margaret is back and we'll talk to her. So the police come back a couple of weeks later to further ask questions and maybe even speak to Margaret at this point. But Margaret's been missing for 6 months. So they ask Louise, like, okay, you know what? Can we just look around the house? You know, this is just weird. Like, what is really going on here? So they're looking around the house, and in the backyard, they discover a shallow grave. It's under an avocado tree, and in the shallow grave is Margaret's decomposing body. Louise is immediately arrested, this time only taking a couple of hours for Louise to be charged with murder again. So the autopsy report determined that Margaret had been shot in the back of the neck, and she also had a fractured skull. So during questioning, Louise tells police that Margaret was actually attacked and shot to death by her husband Arthur during one of his anger fits of rage, and that she had been telling the neighbors about it. And if they didn't believe her, they should go ask the neighbors because they knew all about Arthur's abuse. Honestly, I'll give her a point there because that's kind of smart. That's kind of smart. I'll give her that. She's literally thinking ahead. You don't see that too often with most killers, like this much, you know? So Louise admits to police that in a panic, she had buried Margaret and didn't report the incident because she was afraid that they would charge her with murder because of her previous convictions. Or, you know, because maybe she murdered her. But she insisted she was innocent. She did not kill her. So Louise's husband, Lee, he was also arrested and charged with murder. And like his wife, he also insisted that he was innocent. The murder charge against him was dropped because there wasn't enough evidence. So Lee was released, but his freedom was short-lived because guess what happens? The very next day, Lee jumps to his death off the 9th floor of an office building in Los Angeles. You guys, this is too strange because I don't know if people are just offing themselves. I'm not trying to be funny, but if that's the case, or if they are being killed by Louise, but Louise seemed to be in police custody. So maybe he did. I don't know. I just don't understand how this is happening. I really don't. Like, are they killing themselves or are they being killed? I want to say that they're being killed, but I don't know. Anyway, so for the first time, Louise actually shows some emotion when she learns about her new husband's death. And she openly cries and she tells reporters, the media, that she felt she was the one to blame for Lee's death. That's because you are. I wonder if there's like some life insurance she's collecting on these guys or what the deal really was because again, this is just bizarre. So Louise's third and final murder trial begins on April 23rd, 1945. It gets some media attention, but nobody really cares as much as they did as like the first time. So the prosecution believed that Louise killed Margaret in order to gain control over the Logan family finances, which makes the most sense. The prosecution thought that Louise got in an argument. There must have been an argument between her and Margaret after she discovered a check that Louise had forged, which then led to her killing Margaret. That's what they believe happened. And it must have been a very compelling argument because on May 31st, the jury found Louise guilty of first-degree murder. Again. But this time, Louise received the death penalty. Okay? Not life in prison. This time, she was going to be put down. No more of her shenanigans. Now, it was said during her sentencing, Louise sat calmly reading a book of Chinese philosophy called The Importance of Living, and she only looked up once to make some kind of mocking facial expression before going back to her cell. So over the next several years, Louise attempted to appeal several times. She maintained that she was innocent, but each appeal failed. Her day of execution finally arrived, April 11th, 1948, exactly 8 years after she walked out from the women's prison the first time. This lady has way too many coincidences going on in her life, huh? Anyways, Louise tells, like, you know, her friends in the jail or whatever that she's ready. She's ready to go, and she calmly, like, walks from her cell to the gas chamber. And it was said she was smiling, and she's like, yay, I don't know, yay. And everyone's just watching her as she's entering the room. Now, she had a really big crowd of people watching her, like one of the most ever. I forget how many it was, like 80, I want to say 80 people were watching her be put down, which is very unusual. As the guards left the chamber, one of them offered a final farewell saying, "Goodbye, good luck, breathe deep, and don't fight the gas. Thanks." And at 10:03 a.m., the deadly gas pellets dropped, and 10 minutes later, Louise was declared dead. She was the second woman in the state of California to be executed. Honestly, good. She caused way too much chaos, my God. Oh my God. And that, my friends, is the story of Louise. I don't even know what her name is because she changed it. What was her name? Louise P? I don't even know. Louise P. Great. So this story, it totally sounds fake. It totally does, but it's a real story. She was, I don't want to call her crazy, but she was crazy. Something was off. I don't even have any words because it was like, good. There's no place for her. I'm sorry, girl. Like, you had many chances. Oh, a lot of chances. And you chose violence over and over and over again. Goodbye. I'm not a big fan of the death penalty, but in cases like this, it totally makes sense. You know, like, she literally proved that she doesn't want to change. Anyways, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts down below. I kind of love these older stories because the women back then seem to be real different, real unique, passionate killers, I must say. But I would love to hear your guys' thoughts down below. I think I like this makeup look. It's cute. It's my hair I'm not liking. I hate my hair. I'm having a very bad hair day. I don't know what to do with it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I appreciate you so much for hanging out with me here and, you know, just being a friend. I really appreciate you, especially if you made it this far into the video at the very end. You're a real one. I appreciate you. I hope you have a good rest of your week. You make good choices. Please be safe out there. Let me know down below in the comment section what you or who you want me to talk about next week. I love you guys, and I'll be seeing you later. Bye. Vampire. Love a vampire. Fun. Are they real? I don't know, you know? But today I'm going to tell you about a woman, that journalist in Australia called the lesbian vampire killer. I don't know what's going on over there, but, you know? You guys got something, okay. Anyways, lesbian vampire killer. Yeah, what a title. She was literally reported to be in newspapers and tabloids, a vampire who'd been caught killing as a part of her need to feed. And stories to this day still circulate on the internet, many of which still claim she was a literal supernatural creature. I mean, it can't be true, right? So I got to beep-bop-booping, snooping around, and let me tell you about what I found out, because, let's get into it. Today we're talking about Tracy Wigginton. Now, she was born in 1965 in Rockhampton, in Queensland, Australia, which is like 7 hours up the coast from Brisbane. How'd I do? Her parents got divorced shortly after she was born. Oh, I need to add a disclaimer. This story is all sorts of bad, okay? We're going to talk about everything from sexual abuse to sucking blood to lots of other things. Just a disclaimer, because it already starts off bad. All right, so Tracy's mom, her name was Rachel. She felt like she wasn't really able to take care of Tracy after she was born. So instead of taking care of herself, she decided, okay, what if my parents, which would be Tracy's biological grandparents, would adopt and take care of her? Rhonda's parents' names were Avril, like Avril Lavigne, and Greg Wigginton. So they adopt and take in Tracy. Great, right? No, unfortunately, this was not the right move. Greg, Tracy's grandfather / adopted parental unit, he was a lot of things, okay? For one, he was a wealthy businessman. He was wealthy enough to have adopted Tracy and another girl named Miriam, and it just really seems like money was the only thing that he had to offer. Everything else about him was pretty shitty, okay? He was a crappy husband. I guess allegedly he had many affairs, which everyone seemed to know about, and they're probably not okay with it, but you know, they knew about it. But not only that, the worst thing of all about this Greg guy, he wanted more than just his affairs. So he started taking advantage of his adopted children not long after taking them in. He was molesting them, having relations with them. Just sad. Avril, Tracy's grandmother, was vicious in her own right. According to Tracy, Avril, she knew about the affairs her husband was having and was also made aware of what was happening with the children. And instead of protecting herself, her family. Avril would take her anger out on the kids. Tracy would say that Avril, she would focus a lot of her anger on Miriam. Now, Miriam was allegedly beat up to 4 times a day with cords, with things around the house, getting creative, And there was one time when Avril had taken Miriam outside of the house, tied her to like a post that was under the house and left her there overnight. So it's safe to say that like this home was not a safe space for the girls at all, right? Like shit. Apparently, the only thing that Avril really loved in all the world were her chihuahuas. Yeah, Tracy said that she would spoil them and like feed them the dogs premium steak, give them lots of love, cuddles, things you do with dogs. Meanwhile, abusing and isolating the children. Avril was also just an evil, evil witch who should have just stuck with adopting dogs and not children. She was nicer to the animals. I don't know, I don't want to put the animals in danger either, but it just seems like, maybe she should have just stuck with dogs. Like, damn, lady, why you gotta ruin some kids' lives? And Greg. Yeah. When Tracy did have quiet moments alone to herself, she would keep busy by reading books. She loved to read. She would later say that she was really attracted to darker books, ones about witchcraft or shared stories about the other side. The only other information we have about Tracy growing up is that people said she liked to wear black clothes and she was quiet. So because of this, she was a bit of an outsider. Maybe she was quiet because everyone was abusing her and like she probably didn't have a safe space to like speak, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Her grandfather / parent / abuser, Greg, thank God, passed away when Tracy was in 10th grade. But it wouldn't take long for Miss Avril, who is now single, to find a new man. Now, the kids are hoping that things are gonna calm down, but unfortunately, it did not. It was still chaos within the home. This new man that Avril brought in was also abusive, but abusive towards Avril. There was one time when he like slapped her in the face and Tracy had witnessed this and she got so mad that she ended up attacking him. She beat him up so bad that he fractured his nose, but then also she had slammed his hearing aid down his ear canal. It was just new. I hadn't heard that one before. Pretty brutal. I'm not saying what she did was right, but I could understand. Okay, so then that happened, not great. And then Avril, she died shortly after from old age. It was nothing like suspicious or anything. So once she died, this left Tracy completely alone, which, a side note, I have no idea what happened to Miriam. It was like she was there in the home and then I don't know where she went from here. But okay, Tracy is now on her own. So she ends up moving back with her biological mother for a bit. But I guess that didn't work out, reasons unknown. But after that, she moved in with her mother's friends. Their names were Catherine and Ron. According to Tracy, she said this guy Ron started having sexual relations with her shortly after she moved in. God, right? Like, damn, she can't catch a break. So at this point, she would have been like 16 or 17 years old. Either way, clearly he was taking advantage of her. And that's when she found out that Ron was also sexually abusing his own daughter. So Tracy does the right thing, and she goes to Catherine, who's married to Ron, and she tells Catherine what's been going on, that he's been having sex with her and also the daughter. Catherine, she ends up kicking Ron out of the house. Awesome, great, right? Of course not. No, because get this. I guess Catherine also had a thing for younger children. And she too started making sexual advances on Tracy. When I was reading this, I was like, holy crap, can poor Tracy get a damn break? With all of this being said, I'm sure you can understand that maybe Tracy is not doing well mentally. She's had to deal with a lot in her upbringing. Shit. So once Tracy turned 18, that's when she received a pretty large inheritance from Greg's estate. Now, this would be enough to keep a roof over her head, and also she didn't have to worry about finding work. It was security. It was something that Tracy had never had before. Just a whole new world. Oh, whole new world. The inheritance she got gave her so much freedom. Freedom to explore herself, freedom just to be, and most of all, be away from abusive parental units trying to take advantage of her. This is when Tracy chopped all her hair off. She started dressing like a biker, and she traveled around the country while going from one relationship to another. Like, not in a bad way. She's just young, free, and exploring opportunities, you know? Tracy said that she knew she was gay from a young age, and now that she was quote-unquote free, it gave her the opportunity to fully explore that other side of herself, and that's exactly what she did. So she does this for a couple of years, and then at the age of 22 is when she meets a woman named Debbie. She and Debbie would end up settling down, deciding to be in like an official relationship, and they moved to Brisbane, where they would live together for about 2.5 years. It was all great until it wasn't. So 2 years into the relationship is when things really started to just go downhill. The two of them were bickering a lot, you know, and it kind of seemed like things were coming to an end. But before they officially ended it, they decided to have an open relationship. Now, this would give them the opportunity to explore other sexual partners, but also still be together. So this seemed like a great idea on paper, but I guess Tracy, it seems like she really didn't want that. Maybe it sounded like a good idea, but when it came down to it, she did not like this whole open relationship deal. I look like I have a black eye. Tracy would say that it made her furious. I mean, top-notch upset when Debbie would bring other people home and she could hear the two engaging in like sexual relations in the room next door. I'm sure nobody would like that. Well, I mean, for the most part. I'm sure there's going to be a comment in the comment section like, well, I like it. So that's great for you. But in regards to this story, Tracy did not like Nay. Well, when little Debbie over here, little Debbie, when she would bring people over to the house to engage in relations, Tracy just wanted a place to go to vent her frustrations, get out of the house, maybe even find herself a new side piece or something, you know? So she goes and she ventures out. And that is when she meets 24-year-old Lisa. Mind you, Tracy is also 24 at this time. So who's this Lisa girl? Well, let me tell you, Lisa. Tracy and Lisa, they both had a lot in common. For starters, they were both young women, great. They both were like ready to have fun and party. They were both into women. And also, they were both very interested in the occult and anything dark. They were like, oh my God, you love Satan? Me too. I love Satan. Yay. You know, they just bonded over that. So they became involved with one another and started dating or hooking up. On top of that, Lisa also had 2 really close friends, and she introduced them to Tracy. So it was great. It was like, ooh, group of friends, great. There was 23-year-old Kim and another 23-year-old named Tracy. Yes, another Tracy, but this Tracy doesn't really play a big role in the story, so I won't be referring to her until like the very end. So it shouldn't be confusing. Anyway, the 4 of them became super close and formed their own little friends group, which is great. It was kind of like what Tracy needed to get out of the house, to kind of socialize. Great. So these ladies became Tracy's escape group, just new friends to go to and vent, just hang out with, talk, you know. When she needed to get out of the house especially, this group of girls were there for her. Now, this is all great and dandy, right? This is exactly what Tracy needs. The downside, though, Tracy didn't tell them the full truth as to who she was. She fabricated a little bit. I mean, think of it like this. You know when you meet new friends and you talk about, like, your interests and hobbies and stuff? Yeah. Well, this was, like, Tracy's opportunity to spice up her story a bit to her new friends. I mean, why not? She doesn't want to tell them the truth. The truth is actually really sad, you know? So she tells her new friends that she had a, quote, unquote, vampire nature, most likely drawing from all of the stories she read as a teen. But because she was so knowledgeable in vampirism from her books, Tracy sounded very convincing. She's like, yeah, I'm a vampire. And everyone was like, what? You're a vampire? She's like, yeah, I suck blood. Yeah. She tells her friends that she only feeds on human blood. And she goes on to tell them that lately she had been surviving by drinking animal blood, specifically pig's blood, that she's dying for human blood. It's just been a while. So she's been drinking pig's blood, allegedly. We don't know. Tracy also told them that she couldn't help it. She had a quote, need to feed, end quote. Yeah. Tracy at one point asked her new friend / kind of girlfriend, Lisa, if she would let her drink some of her blood. And in order to do so, I mean, all she had to do was cut her wrist and let Tracy have a little sippy sip. I'm not sure if they did or not. Some sources say they actually did, and Lisa would tell others that they did, but no one knows for sure, you know? Either way, Lisa did tell, like all the other girls, that Tracy sucked her blood, which was just adding credibility to her vampire ways. Either way, okay, Tracy had officially entered her vampire era. We all go through phases, I guess. I want to put my hair behind my back, but last time I did this, like, someone commented, and it burned into my brain. This is a side note. But someone commented that my bra straps were very distracting and they couldn't focus on the story. So whoever you are who said that, I just don't want to distract you. But I'm going to do it, okay? Okay. So Friday, October 20th, 1989. The group of friends, they decide they're going to go out for the night. So they went to downtown Brisbane and they hit up a couple of bars and just do their thing. It's Friday. Let's get down, you know. Towards the end of the night, Tracy turns to her friends and she gets all serious. And she's like, I need a real drink. And the friends were like, ooh, okay. Tracy, meaning that she needed blood. Later, the friends said that they were too afraid to challenge her. I mean, she was a vampire and they didn't want to, like, put themselves in danger, so they went along with it. But many believe that the friends actually just wanted to see Tracy in action. Is she really a vampire? Well, she tells the friends that she needed someone to eat. She needed to find someone to eat, first of all. So they all hop into the car and go on the hunt. Now they're driving around until they find their perfect person, like a frickin' shark in the water. Sharks. Which brings us to Edward Baldock. Now they literally spot Edward stumble out of a bar in Kangaroo Point in Brisbane. Apparently, it was obvious that Edward had been hammered. That night, Edward had been out drinking with some friends, and he was now outside waiting for a cab to head home to his wife and 4 children. So Edward is on the side of the street trying to hail a cab. Again, he's sloshed. So he doesn't really notice that the car that pulled over was not a cab. Instead, it was a green sedan with 4 young women inside. He didn't notice. They roll down their window and they offer Edward a ride. Edward hops into the car and they head towards Orley Park, which is like a little park area right next to a river. It's about 10 minutes away from the Kangaroo Point bar where Edward was at. Now, while in the car with Edward, the group of friends allegedly offer him like sexual favors. Now, I read some sources that said that they said that when they pulled over to pick him up and they were like, hey, we'll have sex with you, blah, blah, blah. And that's why he got into the car. And then I read other sources that said that he was already in the car and then they're like, hey, we'll have sex with you. But either way, he's down, you know? And what do you think he's going to say? No? Come on. So he's not thrown off when the car, you know, pulls over next to the park and stops. He's like, I'm going to get some. I'm going to get that. Now, Tracy tells Edward to come down to the bank of the river with her, Kim, and Lisa. Once they were there, Tracy removed her top and told Edward that he should take off his clothes too. Now, while he's doing so, Tracy tells him that she has to go potty real quick and she'll be right back. She's like, I'm going to go potty. You keep undressing. Tracy tells the others that she felt like she couldn't kill Edward on her own and that she probably would need help. She also had a knife on her, which wasn't unusual. Like, I guess she carried it on her pretty often. Safety, I get it. But, like, she had a knife on her. But the thing was, she really wanted help from the other girls. The plan was something along the lines of Lisa being the one to stab Edward in the neck, then Tracy could drink the blood because she needed blood ASAP. She was starving, craving it like never before. Now, this sounded like a good idea to Lisa. She was down, but when it came down to it, Lisa hesitates with the knife. So Tracy, on the other hand, was not fucking around. She was ready to do this. But Lisa backs up, chickens out, says, I'm not doing it, gives her back the knife. It's like, yeah, the vampire thing is hot when it's like dirty talk or whatever, but when it came down to it, Lisa was not down to kill Edward. She tells Tracy, I'm done, going back to the car, like I can't do this. Well, Tracy takes the knife from Lisa and walks back towards Edward. So at this point, he's like sitting at the edge of the river with nothing on. He took all of his clothes off except for his socks. It was so sad too because I guess Edward like had neatly folded his clothes. At least he's a neat drunk. He still folds his clothes. Wow. This time though, instead of like the group of girls coming towards Edward, it was just Tracy. It was just her walking towards him. He asked Tracy, what are you doing? You know, I guess she had this creepy look in her eyes. She just kept her eyes locked with him and walked towards him. And not even a moment later, she pulled the knife from her pocket and replied nothing before kablam. She swung the knife up and she stabbed him right into the side of his neck. Girl, what are you doing? Go home. What are you killing this man for? Just minding his own business. I guess like Edward tried to fight back, but he was struggling and he was like trying to reach for the knife, but he couldn't and he couldn't throw her off either. Tracy pulled the knife out of Edward's neck and stabbed the other side of his neck. This time like plunging the knife repeatedly into his throat with the goal of trying to sever the tendon, whatever. She's trying to like decapitate him. For reals. What she did do was snap his spinal cord, but that didn't stop her. Now this part blew me away because it's sick. She ended up stabbing Edward a total of 27 times. Girl, no, we can't be, no. That's like a crime of passion. But this was random. I thought she was a vampire, not a killer. Well, she stabs him 27 times in the face, neck, and in his back before ending it, as if he wasn't ended, by slitting his throat. Now, I know that's a lot, but it gets worse. It's not funny, but, you know, gotta find humor. But as far as the story goes, she was far from finished. I read one source that said she's stabbing him, right? And then when she's done, I don't know how to say this, okay? But he's laying on the ground with his face down. And he has a big wound on his back because she stabbed him a bunch of times. So I'm sorry, but this part was like, what? I guess Tracy then fingered the open wounds on his back to get like some blood on her fingers to like eat it, which is not very vampire-like. I'm pretty sure vampires don't finger holes, Tracy. Maybe she's a trailblazer, I don't know. Another source said that she didn't do this, that she actually drank the blood directly from his neck. Either way, she did allegedly get some blood in her system, and then she went and rinsed off the blood and the evidence in the river, and then headed back to the car with her friends. So Tracy goes up to the car, and she's like, hey, you guys want to see his body? And they all reported saying that they could smell the blood on like Tracy's breath and like, oh shit, she really did that. She really did it. She wasn't kidding. So Lisa and Kim decide to get out of the car to go check it out. But remember the other Tracy? She was in the car. And she was like, hell to the freaking no. No, I'm not going. She's the only one with brains around here. She's like, no. She ends up staying in the car, which good for her. So I guess the trio, they go and they check it out. Just for a split second to see it, I guess. And then they take off, leaving poor Edward's naked, mutilated body in the park and leaving nothing behind except for one very big piece of evidence. Sloppy. Well, it wouldn't take long for police to find Edward in the park the very next morning, but they also find a major piece of evidence. Inside of Edward's shoe, they found an ATM card. It wasn't Edward's. You know who it belonged to? Tracy. It was Tracy's ATM card. Yeah, there were different reports as to how this may have happened. I really don't know. It's not very clear, but it happened. Police find an ATM card inside of Edward's shoe that says Tracy Wigginton right smack on it. Now, here's the funny part. Well, it's not funny, but like, you know, jeez. Investigators didn't initially think that this ATM card would lead them straight to the killer because what killer, first of all, would be that sloppy? Second of all, they were like, well, maybe she knows. So they did want to find and question Tracy because perhaps she would have some information as to like who may have done this. So police locate and question Tracy and she tells investigators like, yeah, I was at the park. I'm a vampire. No, she doesn't say that, but she's like, yeah, I'm at the park. Or I was at the park. But she mentions like, I didn't kill anyone. She's like, I would have remembered that. So police are like, no, right. You know, she must be telling the truth because police genuinely believed that whoever the killer was, it was no way, or there was no way, it was a woman. Because they believed that there was no way a woman was capable of committing such a gruesome crime. It had to be a man. Which, to be fair, usually that is the case. This is a very rare occasion that this woman would be. Well, anyways, Edward's murder, it was indeed very gruesome. And police were like, it's a man. This Tracy, she might know something, but like, it's a man. 100%. Well, you know how it goes. Well, actually, I hope you don't know how it goes. But when there are many people who witnessed a murder or a crime taking place, it's not easy to make sure that they all stay focused, on track, have the same story, and don't crack, right? You can't control everybody. And eventually, one of them would crack. Which, good, right? Good. That's what you get, Tracy. That's what you get. Well, guess who it is? It's Miss Lisa, the lover. She can't carry the weight of this murder on her. She's going nuts. So she ends up going to authorities and she tells them exactly what happened that night. I guess Lisa had felt like, look, eventually we're going to get caught. Like, there's no way. And the ATM card. And the only way to get out of this would be to get ahead of it. So Lisa goes to authorities. She rats out Tracy, Kim, and the other Tracy. And they too were brought in and questioned. And they told police everything, allegedly. Because they also kind of fabricated some stuff. Everything's alleged. So they kind of exaggerate. Sorry, it's my beauty blender. So they're telling authorities, or painting a picture to authorities, that Tracy, she's far more than just a vampire, okay? Tracy had told them on numerous occasions that she was the wife of the devil and that she can control and manipulate people all around her. And most of all, none of them could do anything against her because they were under her spell when the murder took place. Or maybe they were drunk. Or maybe this is true. I don't know. I was not there. I mean, thank God that Lisa came forward because they thought it was a man. So who knows how long it would have took them to go back, circle back to Tracy. So now with the confessions, the ATM card, they knew Tracy was their girl. So they go over to where she lives. They placed her under arrest. And apparently Tracy did not resist. And she even confessed to what she did. I know, shocking. It wasn't a man. Plot twist. Wow. Who would have thought, huh? So all of the rumors and details as to what happened that night started to leak to the media. And, it was like Christmas came early for them. Because, you know, the media, they love a story that is different and makes people upset. So, I mean, even without the whole vampirism of it all, 4 young gay women, they were all gay, murdering a quote-unquote normal, everyday family man. I mean, this was tabloid gold. Except it wasn't just the tabloids getting in on it. It was everywhere. News of the murder spread to mainstream sources. It was just everywhere. I hear that it was everywhere. So, okay, Tracy's under arrest. She confessed. Great. So the court proceedings for these girls, I mean, it was so jam-packed in the courtroom that you would think like a major celebrity was on trial. For weeks, the court heard testimony from Tracy's friends and acquaintances, and they were like talking about what kind of woman Tracy was. Now, by this point, Tracy was already locked up, and she didn't even have to appear in court for like the other girls' trials. So nobody in the media or in like the court audience, whatever, nobody had like actually seen Tracy by this point. So it was like she became like this mythical creature, only defined entirely on the details that were provided by everyone else. Which, that's gotta suck. But I don't know, lady, you murdered somebody, so what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? The friends described Tracy as malicious and a supernatural woman who lived, again, off of animal blood, and was obsessed with the occult and magic rituals. But most importantly, Tracy had supposedly all three of the girls under some kind of spell that night. They claimed that Tracy was controlling them, forcing them to go along with killing Edward. Now, the media did what the media does best, and they took these little details and they went wild with it. Now, they had some wild headlines for this whole situation. There was one headline that said, quote, "Cradle of a demon, hate-filled home bred a vampire," end quote. And then there was another one that was a little bit more extreme. It was, quote, "Frenzy of a deadly feed, murderer was a bride of the devil." Yeah, so they're making claims that she was married to the devil. She's like, yeah, that's a bold claim. Any word from the devil himself? Can we confirm? Devil, do you have any words? Were you indeed married to Tracy? Those are the details I really wanted. I tried to contact the devil for confirmation, but could not reach him. And of course, they all dug into these women being gay. And they were just like, gay, you know. Girls gone wild, topless demon women, doing demon things, next up at 11. I mean, I get it when the media does that, because yeah, you would like be interested, like, what? But I mean, come on. Demon, So the trial wasn't even about like, innocent man murdered. It was just the court instead was overpowered by drama. You know, people were obsessed with who or what Tracy was. And it was just the talk of the town, huh? I mean, it just added to the spectacle, the excitement, the horror of the lesbian vampire killer. And it was a hot mess. So what actually happened were two things. It was clear to people that Tracy had snapped, okay? Allegedly, this was her first kill, but it was clear, like, that she hadn't been roaming the streets of Australia hunting for blood often. This seemed to be her first time. I mean, I don't know. She was riding a motorcycle all over the country. How do we know? Because this is such an intense murder for your first time. But then again, she had a lot of built-up anger and stuff from her childhood. Maybe she just couldn't stop. I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyways, I guess Debbie testifies. Remember Debbie, the girlfriend? So after Debbie started sleeping with other people, I guess, you know, this is really what set Tracy off. Like, she just couldn't deal with it. Many believe that it just kind of brought to surface the childhood trauma and abandonment, stuff like that. Tracy even said that if she had stayed home with Debbie the night of the murder, she probably would have ended up killing Debbie instead. I'm sure hearing that in court, like if you were Debbie, you'd be like, oh, fuck. You almost killed me? Oh, shit. So little Debbie, the ex-girlfriend, she either testified or gave a statement. Either way, she said that the night of the murder, which she didn't know a murder had taken place, right? But what she does remember was that when Tracy had come home that night, Tracy was acting a little off. She said, like, at first she noticed that Tracy was, like, super energized. She had a ton of energy, like, her adrenaline was pumping. And then, I guess, like, Tracy was super hot and bothered and wanted to have sex with Debbie, like angry, passionate sex or something. Debbie said that Tracy told her to, quote, "Get in the bedroom, I just saw a dead body," end quote. And then they had sex. I'd be like, what was that second part? You saw a dead body? Huh? What was that? What? We're just gonna skip that? So I guess, like, again, like, this had just had her moist, okay? And then Debbie noticed throughout the night when they were trying to sleep or whatever, Tracy was like tossing and turning She was mumbling to herself, saying over and over again, this is real, this is real, this is real. Like, over and over again. And I guess Debbie didn't ask her. Okay, Debbie. But it just seemed like Tracy was trying to convince herself, like, what really happened, and also just bring herself maybe back to reality, which, like, had my noggin going. Wasn't there another story I did where it was like someone got super turned on by killing maybe all of them? Huh? I don't know. So I guess Tracy almost didn't go to trial because she had undergone psychiatric evaluation a couple of weeks prior to determine if she was, like, competent or not. And the experts were actually very split. So I guess there were several prominent psychologists and psychiatrists who believed that Tracy actually had multiple personality disorder. But, like, for real. I only say that because, like, a lot of the times here on our Monday uploads, we hear a lot of wild claims, right? But in this case, they believe that Tracy had this. So Tracy underwent over 26 hours of hypnosis. Oof. Which some people even have mixed feelings about hypnosis, but she went through 26 hours of it. And while she was under the hypnosis, she revealed that she had 4 main personalities inside of her. Let me explain. There was Big Tracy. Now, Big Tracy was anxious and a depressed person. Probably closest to who Tracy actually was. Someone who had a conscience and who was actually horrified by the murder and what she had done. And they believed, like, this was probably the Tracy who was tossing and turning that night in bed with Debbie. Psychiatrists believed it was actually Big Tracy who left the ATM card in Edward's shoe that night. Maybe she wanted to get caught. Maybe, you know. Okay. Go on. There was also Little Tracy. Now, Little Tracy was, maybe you can guess it, Tracy's, like, former child self, kind of representing the innocence she had before all of the abuse had taken place. It was childlike, innocent, sweet, I don't know. Tracy had another personality called the Observer. Now, this was a detached personality, and the only one that didn't have any emotion behind it. It was kind of like the part of Tracy's brain that calmly collected all the thoughts and actions of the other personalities, and it was like the secretary. It took notes, hence the name, the Observer. I wonder if they pick the names, like if Tracy picks the names, or if the names, like, choose themselves. Interesting. Then there was another personality named Bobby. Oh, Bobby. Bobby was a motorbike riding, badass, macho daddy. And Bobby was the one who was responsible for killing Edward. I thought it was a vampire. No, it was Bobby Bailey. It was Bobby. Again, these are all Tracy's personalities within herself. Allegedly. I mean, I guess. So again, psychiatrists were torn. Was she faking it or telling the truth? Well, do you want to hear my personal opinion? I think she was telling the truth because if you ever look into multiple personality disorders, I mean, I'm not a doctor or anything, so, you know, take this with a grain of salt. This is my personal opinion. Usually when you go through a lot of trauma, you detach from the trauma. It's the only way to survive, and you kind of create a different personality, or at least your brain does. And when you go through years of abuse and trauma, your brain creates these different personas to kind of store away all of the hurt, pain, anger, bleep, blah, bloop. So in Tracy's case, because she's been abused since what sounds like day one, and by different people, I mean, it makes sense. I would definitely believe she had that. It doesn't matter regardless because, like, she murdered someone and she needed to be held accountable. But it was just kind of them finding a reason as to why, you know? Which is what everyone is curious to know. One of the doctors who looked at or examined Tracy, his name was Donald Grant. He concluded that everything she was called, a vampire, a Satanist, a psycho, etc., etc. He said that killing poor Edward was actually Tracy's way of taking revenge on all of her past abusers. That's just his observation. There were other psychiatrists that believed Tracy actually had another personality to her, which would make 5 personalities inside of her. And this one was considered like a shadow personality, like the biggest one of all. It was like considered the puppet master, the one in charge pulling all of the strings. They believed it's the one that forced Tracy's personality of Bobby to kill that night. You get it? Yeah. And you know what that personality was called? Avril. Yeah. Tracy's grandmother / adopted mother / abuser. Her. Makes sense. I'm like, I could see that. Yeah. Well, this diagnosis did not get Tracy out of a trial. Wait till you hear this. Hold on. Just you wait. Okay, so the jury, they don't really care about Tracy's diagnosis. Totally fair. And they end up sentencing her to a life sentence with the possibility of parole after serving 13 years. Cute. I'm not mad. I don't even like gloss. Who am I? And even though the 3 others were trying to act as if Tracy was a real full-fledged vampire with mind control powers, the jury just didn't believe them. So Lisa, remember Lisa? She also received a life sentence, which I was like I was shocked by that. I was shocked by that one. I mean, yeah, she was like there and she needs to serve time, but like not, what? Anyways, while Kim, the other friend, she received a lesser sentence for manslaughter with 18 years, but it was reduced to 12. And then remember the other Tracy? Do you remember the other Tracy? Good for her, because remember she stayed in the car? She was like, hell no, I'm not going. She was acquitted. Someone had a brain. She was the only one who had enough sense to not get out of the car once they got Edward to the park where he was killed. She was like, damn, close call. Okay, plot twist though. I thought Tracy would be locked up for a long time because she was sentenced to life in prison. But correct me if I'm wrong, Australia, but I did a little Googling, and based off of what I found, and it was a quick Google search, life sentence in Australia means 20 years. Is this true? Because to me, a life sentence means life. Australia's a little different. They're different down under, aren't they? Well, okay, I thought she would be locked away for a long time. I mean, while in prison, she allegedly, there was reports that she tried to fight a guard. There was something else that I'm totally forgetting. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I thought she was going to be locked up for a long time. I mean, the murder was really gruesome, okay? But get this. Tracy was released from prison in 2012. She's been out. She was awarded parole and has kept a pretty low profile, but there was this one time when she was released, she attempted to sign up for Facebook. I guess she had posted some vampire pics on her Facebook little timeline thing, and she also posted a picture that said, quote, "Now panic because I'm back." And that didn't go over so well, so didn't last long. But she may have one now. I really didn't look that hard. She may be using a different, who knows, whatever. She hasn't committed any crimes since, so Avril and Bobby are not on a rampage. You know, based off of, there was one interview where Tracy really seemed to grasp the gravity of what she had done. During an interview from prison in 1996, she said, quote, "Murder is a terrifying experience. It's extremely scary to have that much power. It's playing God with life and earth. Nobody should have that sort of power. But we all do," end quote. And they let her out. If she would have just said, nobody should have that sort of power, period, okay. But then she said, but we all do. Are you going to do it again? I don't know. I could not find updates on the others. So let me know if you know, but I couldn't find anything. I do hope Lisa got out. I mean, right? Or no? Do you think she should have got life in prison? And Kim? She's got to be out by now, but I don't know. Anyways, that, my friends, is a story about Tracy Wigginton, the lesbian vampire killer, whatever. I think this is really just a case of, no, I don't know what this is. I just know that the killing of Edward was very brutal and gruesome and beyond murder. It was ew. It was just bad. And for that alone, I just feel shouldn't she be locked up longer? No? Okay. Well, she's in Australia, so hey, Tracy. I don't know. Anyways, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts down below. She should be locked up, right? Right? No? Okay, let me know. I think that's it. That's all I have to say, really. I think we can all agree at the end of the day, because two things could be right at the same time. Tracy had a terrible upbringing, a terrible childhood. She didn't have a childhood. She just had a terrible life up until the murder took place. And that's sad, right? But she also did a really bad thing, and she should be locked up for that. But it's okay to feel bad for her. I feel like people are always like, I don't know how to feel. It's like you could feel two things at the same time. Bad for her and be like, she's shitty. Words of wisdom, huh? I would love to hear your guys' thoughts down below. Let me know who you want me to talk about next week. Don't forget, all the products will be listed down below. This is like mainly a drugstore face, and I love it. But other than that, let me know who you want me to talk about next week. But other than that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Make good choices. Please be safe out there. And I will be seeing you guys later. Goodbye. So, today's story takes place in a little town in Missouri called Independence. Yes, it's called Independence, which I guess is like an adorable little neighborhood just east of Kansas City. And back in the 1940s, Independence had around 16,000 people living there. And then in the 50s and 60s, they saw like a big boom. It was like growing a lot, and it went from 62,000 people to then like 110,000 people by the 1970s. Our story takes place in 1960 in this growing town of Independence. So in this town, there lived a girl named Sharon, and growing up, friends would say, even at a young age, I guess, Sharon was always thinking about the day when she could get the hell out of this small town of Independence and move to like a big city, you know? Like Los Angeles or New York. And by the time Sharon was 16, she was just obsessed with reading magazines and following celebrity gossip. It was just all so glamorous to her. She just wanted a life outside of this small town, as many do. The summer when Sharon was 16 years old, she met a guy named James at a church event. Now, James was 22 at the time, so, you know, it's a little questionable, but okay. And he was home for the summer. I guess he ended up, you know, going to the church event, and that's where he met Sharon. James was actually attending college at, how do you say this? Birmingham? I don't even freaking, hold on.
Such mountain range. Brigham Young University is one of the world's...
Brigham. James was a college student at Brigham Young University, and he was also studying, or he was an engineering student. So he's like, you know, smart. Engineering student, wow. He also grew up in Independence, but he was able to break out of the small town and move to Provo, Utah. Sharon found, you know, she found this to be very exciting. Someone who actually broke out of the small town and like moved on to do bigger things. She was like, oh my God, do me now. She was infatuated with him. And honestly, James seemed to be infatuated with Sharon as well. Isn't this cute? This is a side note. I just want to say thank you to my friend Jill. She got this little neon sign for me for my birthday, Christmas. It was very nice of her. That's so thoughtful. Thank you, Jill. It's just cute. So the two ended up having a summer of love, smooching and stuff. But as soon as summer ended, it was time for James to go back to school. He does have to go back to school. Now, he promised Sharon that he would like write her as often as he could while he was away, which he did. Like, he held on to that promise. Now, Sharon would always get excited to see a letter from James, but not long after going back to school, James gets a letter in the mail from Sharon, and in this letter, she's telling him that she's pregnant. James was a practicing Mormon, and baby girl, this is the late 1950s. Getting pregnant out of wedlock as a Mormon, you better think twice, you know? Nay, nay. You don't do that. So the couple needed to figure out something fast, and their best bet was to get married. Well, James does the quote unquote right thing and goes back to Independence and marries Sharon. It happens like very quickly. And after they get married, or I think like right before, I'm not sure if it was right before, like right after, Sharon converts to Mormonism. She becomes Mormon. After the wedding, they both move back to Provo, Utah, so James could finish school. So Sharon's excited because she gets out of independence. That's like everything she wants. Well, not long after moving to Provo, Utah, Sharon ends up having a miscarriage and loses the baby. There are many who have speculated if she was really pregnant or not, but who knows? The two would end up having a baby together in 1957, and they would have a daughter. Well, I guess married life, school, being a parent, it was just all becoming too much for James, and he decides it would be best if he just drops out of school. He just can't do it anymore. Like, the stress was just really getting to him. Because James dropped out of school, they really had no reason to be in Provo, Utah anymore, so the family moves back to Independence. So Sharon is like devastated. Her dream of leaving, she's like, fuck. They end up moving into a small home, which is like very close to James' parents' home, which James's parents were very strict, super Mormon, and they really didn't like Sharon. She wasn't a true woman of their faith, and you know, they wanted the best for their son. So there's some tension. In May of 1959, the couple had a baby boy, but as time went on, their marriage was just not going very well. Sharon and James started having serious discussions about divorce. And I guess at some point, James ended up cheating on Sharon with a past lover, and Sharon had found out, and obviously not a great thing to find out. Your partner's having an affair, right? And because of this, they would argue a lot. But to be fair, now I don't know if James knew this, but Sharon was also doing a little something on the side, okay? She was talking to an old fling and was like hanging out with an old boyfriend that she had before she met James, but she was making James feel really bad. Do you know what I'm saying? You know when a cheater is being a cheater and they make you feel bad for having an affair or cheating, meanwhile they're actually cheating? That's Sharon. That's her. I think one thing that irritated Sharon the most was the fact that she really thought like she got out of Independence, like she had her meal ticket out of there, and then it backfired and she ended up right back there, stuck in this home next to her parent-in-law's house who didn't even like her. I mean, it's just not an ideal situation to be in. Money within the relationship was tight. And this isn't like the life Sharon imagined for herself. She wanted somebody who was financially stable. And again, she wanted to move out of town. Sharon told James that she would be happy to get a divorce only if she got custody of their 2 children, got the house, and also got $1,000 cash. The cash was to help financially until she could like find a job of her own. So James is kind of, I guess he's, you know, he's unsure of what the right thing to do is, so he goes to his parents and he tells them what's going on, and he's looking for some kind of advice, right? What should I do? Like, should I get a divorce? She's unhappy, blah, blah, blah. Well, his parents told James that divorce wouldn't be an option and that the two needed to work it out. They needed to fix the marriage because most of all, like, divorce was just really not okay within their belief system. So they are highly suggesting that they work it out. James listens to his parents and he goes back to Sharon, tells her that he doesn't want a divorce. He wants to work on it. And so they did. But as time went on, the marriage was not getting better. Well, now it's March of 1960. James and Sharon's daughter was almost 3 years old, and their son was about 10 months old. Great. So on March 19th, 1960, Sharon went into her bathroom to get ready for, I guess, like a church dinner that they were heading to. And James, he was feeling a little tired and he wanted to take like a quick little power nap before they went to this dinner. So he lays down on the bed and the bathroom was like right there, right? Because it's the master bedroom. Great. So he decides to lay down, take a nap. Sharon said that she was in the bathroom getting ready when she hears her daughter, who's 3 years old, walking into the bedroom. And she goes up to her dad, James, and says, "Daddy, how does this thing work?" And then Sharon says she hears a kaboom, or a bang, I should say. Bang. Sharon is like, what the fuck? Like, she hears a loud bang. So she runs out of the bathroom and she saw that James is bleeding from his head in the bed, and their daughter was standing next to him with a gun lying on the pillow. Sharon, she recognizes the gun. It's James's .22 caliber pistol. Now, their daughter, and friends and family can confirm this, their daughter had toy guns of her own that she always played with, and Sharon thought that maybe her daughter thought like, oh my God, this was one of her toys, but it was a real gun. James was shot in the back of the head, which showed that he didn't do it himself. And according to Sharon, their daughter was the only one in the room. Mind you, again, she was 3 years old. Killer baby on the loose, you know, like, holy shit. James sadly was pronounced dead at the scene, and he was only 25 years old. So police come out and they question Sharon, like, you know, they have to. What happened? Now, it was reported that Sharon was like very upset. She could barely talk. She seemed like traumatized. They could tell she was upset. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were like, okay, if you're guilty of something, you don't act like that. Police tried to question the 3-year-old daughter. Okay, I'm sorry. I believe the daughter was 2 years old, not 3 years old. It's got to be 2 years old. I'm sorry. She's 2 years old. Please forgive me. So police tried to question the daughter. I mean, she's 2 years old. So they tried to question her as much as she could. There's not much information that she can give them. She could talk and like give basic answers, but not anything in like super great detail. So after questioning the two, police decided not to do a gunshot residue test on the 2-year-old or Sharon because they didn't want to subject them to it. I know. Now, this would be a very big mistake. Doing a gunshot residue test was not as easy as it is today. It was a very lengthy process back then, and police felt like it could further upset the family, who was obviously very traumatized by this horrific accident. The lead investigator on the case did have some questions, though. Like, he was kind of a little like, I don't know, you know? He wondered if a 2-year-old could really pull a trigger at her size. I mean, what are the odds that she could pull the trigger right at his head, like holding it up and everything? Like, did she even have the strength to pull the trigger? So the department, they wanted to test their theory and see like if it's true, if it's possible. So they ended up bringing the daughter back in for questioning, and this was like days later, and they ended up putting an unloaded .22 in front of the daughter, and they told her to pick up and play with it. It's not funny, but it's just kind of like a, you know, I don't know. It just is weird when you think about it. Like, play with this gun. Let's see what she does. Well, I guess the daughter did pick up the gun a few times, but she did not pull the trigger. So it really didn't even answer their question. So the lead investigator ran more tests to see if a 2-year-old could pull a trigger. But unfortunately, they could not get a solid answer. So the theory that they could come up with was that the daughter must have climbed into the bed, asked her dad how to use the gun, and then maybe the body weight may have set the gun off. And that's the only reasoning the investigators could come up with. Well, it turns out James had a life insurance policy. Oh, funny, huh? Now, I know you're going to think you've got this whole story figured out, but let me tell you, this is the stupidest, wildest story. So James had a life insurance policy on him, right? The policy was worth $250,000, which is very odd because James was only 25 at the time. Why would he need such a high life insurance policy? Nobody needs that much at 25. Interesting. Well, Sharon had collected that money about a month after James's death. Now, investigators and people in town, they kind of kept their eye on Sharon. They didn't have any evidence that it was like a murder or anything, right? They had nothing on her, really. But everybody was kind of just really watching her. After she received that insurance money, Sharon was spotted at a car dealership, like buying her dream car, which was a blue Ford Thunderbird. And, you know, a lot of people thought, that's kind of weird. The car salesman was a 23-year-old named Walt. Now, Walt over here was also married with 2 kids of his own. But Sharon found Walt to be just a total babe, and the two would end up having an affair. Oh dear. I need more concealer. This is too natural for me. There we go. Yes, yes. A month since meeting Sharon, Walt goes to the police to report his wife, Patricia, as missing. Ah, weird. He tells police that 2 nights ago, the couple had a fight, him and Patricia. They had a fight, and then the next day she didn't come home from work. So he asked Patricia's coworkers, like, have you seen her? She didn't come home, what's going on? And Patricia's coworkers said that after work, they noticed that Patricia went up to like talk with a woman that was in a light colored Chevy that had pulled up by her work, and like Patricia went straight to the light colored Chevy. Patricia told coworkers that she was gonna get a ride from this person, so like don't wait up for her, whatever. Interesting, right? Great. Now, at the time, Walt, the husband, he figured like maybe she's just trying to not come home because they had a pretty heavy argument and she just needed some time to like cool off and go somewhere with a friend. But once Walt had found out about the car, he got that really like funky feeling. He knew something wasn't right because Walt knew that Sharon, her father's car, was also a light colored Chevy. Oh shit. Sharon. Mind you, Walt is telling all of this to the police. So before going to the police, Walt calls up Sharon and he's like, was that you? Did you go up to Patricia? Like, come on. I know that's your car. What the hell's going on? Now, Sharon confesses to Walt that yes, it was her. And she said that she told Patricia that her sister, Sharon's sister, was having an affair with Walt and that she thought Patricia should know about this affair. Side note, Sharon doesn't have a sister. So she's being that bitch, like, my friend told me that they're having an affair. You get it. You get this game. Sharon tells Walt that the two of them went for a drive to talk about this affair. Then she drove Patricia home, but she dropped her off about a block from Patricia's house. Sure. Sharon tells Walt that it was so funny because like after dropping Patricia off, I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. She saw her walk up to a green car that a man was driving and she started talking to that person. But Sharon just reassured Walt that she was probably just angry and hurt, but off somewhere just like cooling down and trying to get her mind off of, I don't know, the affair. So I guess when Patricia didn't show up for work the next day, that's when Walt got like really upset. And he went to Sharon's house and he confronted her and was like, I know that you did something to Patricia. And then he's like, he threatens her with a knife and he's asking her, what did you do with my wife? But she doesn't give any answer. And Walt tells police this, like, I threatened her with a knife and I know she did something to my wife. What a rhyme. Later on, information would come out that the night Walt and his wife Patricia got into the fight, Walt had tried to like break it off with Sharon hours before. And he was like, look, I'm done with you. I want to work on my marriage, blah, blah, blah. Sharon told him that she was pregnant and demanded that he leave Patricia for her. Now, Walt wanted nothing to do with Sharon and did not even believe that she was pregnant. So naturally, Walt believed that Sharon told Patricia about the affair as revenge. So after reporting Patricia as missing and telling police this whole story, several hours later, a man named John Blades calls the police from a gas station. So this John guy calls the police station and he tells them that he had been out in like an area in Independence near an abandoned farm where he found the body of a woman. Oh my God, yeah. What? This is a side note, but I'm just like randomly thinking. I say it so casually, like, oh, he found a body of a woman. But could you imagine just like minding your own business and you come across a body? That would be fucked up. That'd probably fuck you up for a long time. You're like, wow, I'm having a really great day. Body. I mean, I get upset when I see like roadkill. So the spot where this body was found was also known as like the town's Lover's Lane, you know, where like people would go and make out or like hook up, you know? Yeah, there was a body out there, so that's not good. Police meet up with this John guy, right? And he told police that he was driving in the area. You know, he was on this long drive and all of a sudden he has to go potty. So he pulls over and he walks over into this area where it's like Lover's Lane. And that's where he spots the body. Now, when police were out there with him, they find a purse that was close by. And in this purse, there was an ID card. It was 23-year-old Patricia Jones. Upon further investigation, Patricia was shot in the head, shoulder, and abs. Now, police could tell that this shot, it was done at a close range, and whoever did it tried their best to make it look like a sexual assault had also taken place, but it was determined that that was a lie. There were no physical signs of sexual assault, but whoever did it tried to make it look like there was. Naturally, police are looking at this John guy as their main suspect because Lover's Lane, like the area where people went and where the body was found, it was kind of like, it was quite a walk from the main road. So it's like, if you have to go to the bathroom, why are you walking way out there to go to the bathroom? Like, it didn't make sense to them. So John is feeling the heat and he confesses. Well, he doesn't confess. He admits that he went to Lover's Lane with his girlfriend when they spotted something in the grass. Now, the girlfriend that John was with, she didn't want to be involved. So she was like, please take me home before you go to police. Like, she was really spooked, I guess. So he did that and then made up the story about going to the bathroom. So police felt like this story could be true, but again, they were like, something still doesn't make sense. Like, something isn't right with this John guy. So police keep pushing for more information. And John eventually cracks again. John confesses that he was out there actually looking for Patricia. So I guess like news had gotten out around town that Patricia was missing, right? So John said that his girlfriend had suggested or like made a comment that she was probably out there in the Lover's Lane area with like another man to get back at her husband, which is like, how do you know all that? She, John's girlfriend, told John that they should go out there and look for her because they were like really good friends. So they drove around, and then not long after, that's when they found the body. So police are like, well, who the hell is your girlfriend? Like, how does she know all this? John's girlfriend? Sharon. Yeah, this girl gets around. John's girlfriend was Sharon. Girl, what are you doing? First of all, she has so many boyfriends, this girl. So police are putting together these pieces. They're like, oh, Sharon was the last one to see Patricia, and now she's like the first one to find the body. Interesting information. What are the odds of that, huh? Sharon was brought in for questioning, and they asked her, Walt, and John to take a polygraph test. Walt and John agreed, and I guess they passed the polygraph test no problem. Sharon, she refused. She didn't want to take the polygraph test, which is fine because we all know, or I hope we all know, that polygraph tests are not reliable. But, you know, the fact that she doesn't want to take it is like more suspicious. Now, Sharon tells police that this John guy was the one who was insisting that they go to that location and look for Patricia, not her. Why is he blaming me? I don't know anything. So while they're questioning Sharon, police are also at her home searching her home, right? Okay. So while they're searching her house, they come across a gun box for a .22, but it was empty. Sharon said that she bought that gun to replace the one that killed her husband because police ended up keeping that one and she didn't have it, so she needed to buy one. So she did. Sharon tells police that she bought this gun and she purchased it 2 weeks before Patricia's murder. And they're like, so where's the gun now? Because it's not in the box. Sharon's like, I don't know. I lost it 2 days after purchasing it. She just lost it. That was her excuse. Another mistake was made, and no autopsy was performed on Patricia's body because the funeral home messed up and they picked up the body before they could do an autopsy. It was some kind of mix up, and then they realized that they made this mistake, and then they sent the body back, but they had already embalmed and washed the body. So like there was no point in doing an autopsy because all of the evidence or information they needed had been washed away and just gone, not available. Sharon was arrested on May 31st, 1960, and she was being charged with the murder of Patricia. And also, she was getting charged with the murder of her husband, James Kinney. But to be fair, they really didn't have any evidence. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're ready to pack up and leave right now. You're like, okay, that's the story. Wow, the end. No. Stay put, because look, so right before her trial, Sharon was pregnant. She told people that it was James's baby, her husband, but like the timeline, it didn't make sense, okay? People guessed that it was perhaps Walt's baby because James had been dead for quite some time. But because she was pregnant, her trial did get pushed. A year later, it was finally held. So Sharon's team during the trial had pointed out that this whole case was built against Sharon simply because investigators found the same gun box at Sharon's house because they still haven't found a murder weapon. And also, Patricia's body didn't have an autopsy done, so there's no time of death that could be determined. Sharon's team would focus on the fact that, you know, Patricia could have died like on Thursday or Saturday or Sunday. I mean, who knows? We just don't know. She could have shot herself for all we know. Well, Miss Sharon had spent her money on a good defense team, and it paid off because Sharon was found not guilty when it came to the death of Patricia. And it was said that the people in court actually cheered. Like, they were happy that she was found not guilty because they felt bad for her that she was being blamed for all of this when, you know, it wasn't her at all. People were cheering, and I guess like members of the jury were asking for her autograph. So next up was the murder trial for her husband. So remember John, the boyfriend who found the body with Miss Sharon? Well, he started cracking at the seams. Police were putting pressure on him, you know, say something, because they knew that he knew something. So police would end up getting John to crack a little bit more. John tells police that Sharon had approached him and asked if he would kill her husband, James, and she would pay him $1,000. Now, this was back when he was still alive. I guess she was talking to this John guy. She was busy. I don't know how she had the time. But she asked him if he would kill James. And John was like, no, I'm not gonna kill him for $1,000. That's a ripoff. First of all, I am worth more than that. James is worth more than that. Okay, so John tells her no. And then she asked him, do you know anyone who will kill him? He tells police that this had happened 2 weeks before James was killed. So police are like, oh my gosh, like, we need you to, you know, take the stand at trial and tell everyone this. So in order to prove that Sharon sucks, police set up a plan to catch Sharon on tape confessing to the $1,000 that she had offered to John. They need to catch on tape Sharon mentioning that this actually happened. So John gets her in his car and he's trying to be like, hey, remember that time you asked me to kill James for $1,000? Like, he's trying to get her to say it because there's police officers in the back of his car hiding, like in the back seat, hiding and recording the conversation. Now you're probably thinking, what the hell is this freaking circus? Okay, this is the 1960s. So I guess they couldn't just put like a little recorder in the car. This was back when like someone had to operate the recorder. So a police officer is hiding in the back with the recorder, like, trying not to get caught. Meanwhile, John and Sharon are in the front, like having this conversation. He's like, oh. And he's trying to get her to confess, or at least mention that she had said this to him. But unfortunately, after driving around for quite some time, they could not get her to confess to this. They're like, fuck. You know, all they can do is have John testify against Sharon and just hope for the best. Okay, stay with me because it's about to get real messy. So the trial ends up taking place 2 years later. So in court, James, the husband who was shot by the 2-year-old, James's parents actually stood by and supported Sharon, agreeing that it was definitely the baby who killed their son. Now, this, I guess, was all for show. I don't think they really believed this, but Sharon was threatening to like hide the kids from James's parents if they didn't support her. So John does end up testifying against Sharon, and after 5 hours of deliberation, 22-year-old, yeah, she's young, 22-year-old Sharon was found guilty and sentenced to life. Yay! Right? But don't get comfortable because this does not last long. So Sharon would end up appealing her conviction and it would be overturned 18 months later. It turns into just like this big shit show from here. Her next trial would end in a mistrial because really the only evidence they have is John's word. John? Yeah. I think his name's John. I'm getting everybody real confused right now. Her next trial would end in a mistrial. Then her third trial ended with a hung jury. Her next trial was set for October of 1964. Okay, so October 1964. So Sharon's free. She's out doing her thing. And people really don't know where she went. She just kind of like disappeared. So Sharon's just kind of like off the grid. She's laying low, I guess. Then she appears. She appears in Mexico. In September of 1964, this is a month before she's supposed to go to trial again. She's in Mexico. She gets arrested for murder. So Miss Sharon had left the kids with her in-laws and took off to Mexico with her new boyfriend. Yeah, she gets boyfriends like boom, boom, boom. She's got like beer-flavored nipples or something. She got something special, this one. So while she's there, she took on a new name. She gets a new name for herself. She starts going by Jeanette, but we're just gonna call her Sharon, right? So Sharon would say that they were only in Mexico to get married, not because like they were attempting to run away or anything. They were there to get married, but many speculate that that is most likely not true. Sharon said the first day in Mexico, the couple had gotten a stomach virus and they were stuck in the hotel room for a few days. Then Sharon allegedly left the room to get medicine at a local pharmacy. And then when she got there, oh no, the pharmacy was closed. She's like, what do I do now? What do I do? The pharmacy is closed. She sees that there's a local bar nearby and she's like, I'm gonna go there instead. So she goes to the local bar to hang out and get a drink, I guess. A different kind of medicine. So I guess while she is out doing her thing at this bar, she also brought a gun with her for protection, right? That's what she said. And while she's there, I guess a man approaches her in the bar, buys her a drink, and then invites Sharon back to his hotel room. And she's like, okay, I'll go. So while she's there, she said a man approaches her, buys her a drink, and then invites her to his hotel room. Now at 3 a.m., the hotel clerk heard a gunshot coming from this man's room. When the hotel clerk ran into the room, right, the man was on the bed. There was like blood around. And Sharon was in the bathroom, seeming to like count money. When Sharon realizes that someone had come into the room, she picks up a gun and shoots at the hotel clerk, which did hit him in the arm, but he was okay. After shooting, Sharon tried to run away. But luckily, Sharon was caught, arrested, and charged with murder in Mexico, where she swore up and down that she shot in self-defense. Now, when police searched Sharon's hotel room, they found money, guns, fake IDs, ammo, and it looked like the couple had packed for like a very long trip, not like a quick little trip to get married. It looked like they were on the run. Police sent the bullets back to police in Independence, where they were able to match the bullets to Patricia's murder. Now, unfortunately, there's double jeopardy laws which prevent her, Sharon, from being tried again for Patricia's murder. The bullets matched up. Everything's pointing to Sharon, right? Great. In Mexico, Sharon was tried and convicted. Now, she did receive a 10-year sentence, which she then tried to appeal. And it's funny because it ended up backfiring on her. You see, she appealed, it went back to court, and then they realized like, oh, we were actually way too nice. And they added an extra 3 years on top of her sentence. After her 13-year sentence, Sharon would be deported back to the States and arrested there. Oh, because she had to do the trial for her husband's murder. Okay, and you think this is the end. But let me tell you, get ready. On December 7th, 1969, at around 2 a.m., police were alerted that Sharon had escaped prison. She's gone, bitch. The guards were all questioned to see, like, were you working with Sharon? Because what are the odds that she would successfully escape? Literally slim to none. Like, there's no way she could have escaped unless she had help. And unfortunately, no answers were found. I don't know what this Sharon girl had, but she had something. She used it in her favor. It's been 53 years since Sharon was seen last, and she's never been found since. The end. Can you, what? She got away. That's it. She got away. That's it. Story's over. I have nothing else to say. If you're watching this, Sharon, bitch, girl, what the fuck? She murdered 3 people and got away with it. And she started a whole new life somewhere, probably in Mexico. We don't know. She's probably killed more people. Why not? She's gotten away with it. Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. When I read this story, I was like, it's just, huh? Anyways, that's today's story about Sharon Kinney and how she got away with killing 3 people and hasn't been seen since. What a little bitch. Wouldn't it be funny if she was watching? I'm like, hey, Sharon. Hey. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts down below if you have any. Maybe you've seen Sharon. I don't know. If you have, turn her ass in. Fucking murderer. She blamed her child for killing her husband. Like, that's fucked up. She's like, yeah, the baby did it. And she got away with it. Like, that's wild. Let me know down below in the comment section who you want me to talk about next week. Even though I kind of already know who I want to talk about next week. But other than that, I love and appreciate you so much. I hope you have a great day today. Please make good choices. Be safe out there. And I'm happy to be here. I'll be seeing you guys later. Bye. Today's story is very interesting. It's got everything. Love, sex, money, incest. Yeah, I said it. A lot of incest going on. Last week we had some incest. This week we've got it. I guess I'm on some kind of roll here that I didn't mean to sign up for. My bad. So the story I have for you today is kind of like a car accident, you know? Like, you want to look away, but you can't. So instead you just kind of brake the car a little bit, and then like it causes a bunch of traffic behind you, and now you're late to work. It's like that. Let's dive into the compelling story of Candace, who also went by the name Candy Mossler. Candy Mossler was described by nearly everyone who knew her as a glamorous, platinum blonde Barbie who kept her real age a secret. She was a socialite by nature and an adoring wife by choice. Before Candy met her second husband, his name was Jacques Mossler, who was a multimillionaire who had an intense dedication to work. Okay, he loved to work. From a young age, Jacques Mossler was determined to provide for himself and his future family, as his widowed mother had managed to do for him as a child. Mossler owned a chain of banks and finance companies from Florida to Texas, and as a result, he was rich. Like, he was rich. So Jacques was married beforehand. In his first marriage, he fathered 4 children who were said to be the apple of his eye. And for the first time in his life, work had come second, and his new family was first in his life. Jack was a man that many described as being an individual who simply loved helping children. Because he was raised by a single mother who made sure to try her best to provide for her children, Jack felt like he needed to or wanted to do that the same for other kids, which is like, aw, That's so sweet, you know? So when his first marriage fizzled out for whichever reason it did, Jack filed for divorce and his life changed directions. It was then that Jack met the also recently divorced socialite Candy. Funny how they always show up right when you go through a divorce, you know? So Candy never revealed her real age to almost anyone. Very old school. But it was well known that Candy was at least 20 years younger than Jack. And the age gap really didn't mean anything to them because they fell in love. And by 1949, Jack proposed to Candy and the two were married by springtime. The relationship was, you know, it was the beginning of what looked like a perfect love story. Candy and Jack moved into a 28-bedroom mansion in Houston together where a lavish lifestyle became the new normal for Candy. 28 bedrooms. I would love to know what goes in those rooms because what the hell do you need 28 bedrooms for? Like, I can understand 4 or 5 bedrooms. Okay. But what are you doing with the rest of those rooms? Let me know down below. Candy's just loving it. She's like, dude, I hit the jackpot. Candy, she always had a love for the finer things in life. Okay. And after marrying Jack, she was set to enjoy her new lifestyle permanently. She's not going anywhere. The couple often spent their days traveling between their Houston home and their posh vacation apartment in Key Biscayne, Florida. Nearly 8 years into their marriage, Candy and Jack, Jack was watching the news one day and he heard about a man who had some kind of like manic episode and he ended up killing his pregnant wife and her unborn child in a fit of rage. So Jack is watching the news and he hears this story. The man who had done this, his name was Leonard Glenn, and he had a history of mental illness, according to officials. After shooting his wife and stabbing his infant child, Glenn packed his other 4 kids into a car that he crashed into the snowy banks near his house. Police intercepted and brought Glenn into custody immediately, which then left his 4 children orphaned. So Jack is watching the news. He hears this story, and he hears about the 4 children who are now orphaned. And his first reaction was that he wanted to help. So Jack at this time was worth over $33 million. And he felt like, okay, like I have more than enough money and 28 rooms. I could definitely take on extra children in my life. So together, Jack and Candy decided to adopt these 4 children that were now orphaned. Amazing, beautiful. Great story. The end. I wish, right? In the 4 years following the initial adoption of the Glenn children, the life that Candy and Jack had built for themselves was pretty pleasant. In fact, the Mosler family was seen as the epitome of success, both in terms of money and family values. They were just a great role model. Of course, that is, until Candy's nephew, his name was Melvin Powers, entered their lives. So who is Melvin Powers, you ask? Well, let me tell you. He's a 24-year-old American businessman who was originally from Birmingham, Alabama. Before diving into the world of business, Melvin was in the United States Navy for a few years. After his time at the Navy, he worked at a variety of oddball jobs that ended with him receiving a conviction for a con job in Michigan. Based off of what I was reading, it kind of seemed like Melvin was always looking for the easy way out, whether it be lying to get money or just lying to benefit himself in some kind of way. You get what I'm saying? So the con job that he was doing in Michigan, this conviction resulted in Melvin receiving a sentence to serve 90 days in jail, which he did. And when he was out, that's when he was on probation for his offenses. He decided to move to Houston. And the reason being is because his mother recommended that Melvin get in touch with her sister Candy, aka his aunt, as she lived in Houston with her business owning, very wealthy husband. So like, hey, maybe you should get in touch with, my sister who can maybe help you out. So Melvin's thinking, wow, Mom, thanks for the tip. That's a great idea. And he reaches out to Candy, his aunt, in hopes that, I don't know, maybe her husband could offer him a job, offer him something, to hopefully get him into business and start making money. What transpired between Melvin and Candy was definitely different than they had intended. The relationship as aunt and nephew was strange from the first time that they met in Houston. It was said at this time Melvin was nearly 21 years younger than Candy and was literally her nephew by blood. But that didn't stop the two from experiencing some sexual tension. Yeah, weird. I don't know what I was thinking. This is a side note, but I don't know why I didn't set my under eye. And I now pretty much have to wipe off my foundation. Okay, so yeah, sexual tension. It was happening. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Now, I mean, we could all say, well, maybe, you know, Melvin was doing this on purpose because he knew like he wanted to get into Candy's pockets, you know, her wallet. Or maybe he was just trying to get a leg up in the business world through her husband. Or maybe Candy was feeling some kind of way, like I don't know, maybe she liked having this power or authority over Melvin that left her hot and bothered. Those are just opinions. We don't really know. Whatever it was, their affair lasted for years. Yes, I said affair, because they crossed that line, baby. Oh, they crossed it. You nasties. So Candy would later say that her affair with her nephew was a direct response to having discovered that Jack, her husband, was gay. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Candy said that Jack was struck down by a mysterious illness that left him a homosexual. And this just shattered her. She had no one else to talk to. So instead she turned to her nephew for companionship, which then just led into a sexual relationship. When Jack was in his mid-60s, he started to stay at their Florida vacation apartment a lot longer than he normally would. Whether it was because he was tired of his marriage, or maybe he just wanted to be alone while he kind of experimented, I don't know, or just explore his sexuality more. But he was distancing himself from Candy. At least that was the perception she was getting. While Jack was away in Florida doing whatever it was he was doing, it was a lot easier for Melvin and Candy to hide their affair pretty much because he was never around. Okay. Or at least Candy and Melvin thought their affair was a secret and no one was ever going to know. Jack had agreed to originally help Melvin with his business ventures when he first moved to the home in Houston. He gave Melvin a job working as a trailer salesman. He owned a lot. Melvin worked at that lot selling trailers. Candy was the one who was in charge of mainly financing anything that Melvin needed for his job. So Jack even allowed Melvin to move into the couple's multi-million-dollar mansion and live rent-free. Not long after Melvin had moved in with Candy and Jack, it's when Candy and Melvin grew a little sloppy in the ways that they had hid their affair from Jack. It was said that Jack was not a dumbass. He knew something was going on. He didn't know it was between the two of them, but he knew something was just going on. Now, when Jack did find out the truth, what was going on between Candy and Melvin, he was like, oh, heck no, you nasties. Your bloodline is not royal here and is nothing to protect. Y'all are just gross. Authorities later, they reported that a year after Mel moved in, a coworker was the one who told Jack about what they saw going down when Jack wasn't around. This coworker also said that Melvin was kind of bragging about what he was doing with Candy and how he was doing it all for money. This is what Melvin said to the coworker. Coworker told Jack. Jack is already like, dude, gross. So Jack goes to do some investigating for his own. So he goes looking for Candy's diary. He knows where she keeps it. So he went looking. Grabs the diary, opens it up. What does he see? Further information. He reads what Candy had written down over and over again, multiple times, on different pages. She was going on and on about how she had passionate sexual relations with her nephew, Melvin. After reading Candy's diary, that's when Jack went on to just fire and get rid of Melvin. And 2 officials ordered Melvin to leave the mansion or face arrest. So Melvin is just upset. He's saying some mean things. He's telling Jack he's gonna get his revenge, but he's not going quietly. He's trying to fight, trying to stay. And Melvin left, but when he left, he claimed one day he would return, quote, as the owner of this mansion, end quote. It was said that this left Jack very, it just sat with him and it kind of put some fear within him. He wrote in a personal memo, quote, if Mel and Candace don't kill me first, I'll have to kill them, end quote. Well, it was said it was a personal memo, but I believe it was a diary of his own, a journal of his own. So it was said directly after this whole fight went down. Jack had kicked Melvin out of their house in this big blow up. Jack and Candy, their relationship just went south quickly. Neither Candy nor Jack felt as though they could trust each other anymore. Neither party really respected the other enough to have a healthy, loving relationship again. They both obviously wanted two different lifestyles. In turn, they formally separated later that year. Even though the couple separated, Jack was still providing Candy with a $5,000 weekly allowance to keep her wealthy lifestyle. This would be nearly $45,000 today, will equal to $45,000 today. So he's still giving her an allowance to make her happy pretty much, okay? Despite the fact that the two obviously wanted legal separation from each other, neither of them wanted to be the first to file for divorce. Firstly, their relationship was heavily public as their social status made them increasingly more popular as the years went on. The nature of Jack being gay is something that would be considered normal today, but this was the 1960s. So he feared that outing himself or Candy outing him would result in people losing respect for him and overall just losing everything. So in a way, Jack was like, I don't really want to I don't want to stir the pot in a way, because Candy she could say something and could ruin his life. Candy, on the other hand, she didn't want the public to know that she had been cheating on her husband, and not just cheating on her husband, with her own nephew. Because that wasn't going to be well received. So Candy's like, well, I don't want to start the divorce because Jack could say that I've been having sex with a nephew. It's going to ruin my life. So both are kind of like, you say something, I'm going to say something, you know? On top of just the general perception reasons, the two were worth a lot of money together. If Jack decided to file for divorce, he would have to split all of his wealth with her per their prenuptial agreement, their prenup. If Candy decided to file first, she would only receive $200,000, which was not worth it in her eyes. I mean, that's like only one Birkin bag. How dare he? I mean, I'm sure a lot of us would be like, yeah, I'll take the $200,000, that's good. The only way for Candy and Melvin to receive all $33 million of Jack's net worth was if Jack wound up dead. On June 29th, in 1964, Candy decided to take her 4 adopted children to see their father at his Florida apartment. And this is where Jack was living pretty much full-time after their separation at the Florida vacation home. But he's living there full-time now. So she takes the kids over there to go to visit, we guess. I don't know. They only stayed for a little bit at Jack's apartment, just for a few hours. And during that time, Candy complained that her head was just pounding. She had a migraine. Throughout Candy's life, it was said that she suffered from migraines that were often debilitating. You know, this excuse that her head was hurting, it sounded about right. It wasn't something that was weird. So after a couple hours, it was said that Candy was just tired of being in pain. So she decided to take the 4 children into her car, and they drove off to a nearby emergency room in hopes that the medical staff could help alleviate her migraine. Just moments after Candy left Jack's apartment, an intruder broke in through the front door. He just walked in, I guess. But there was some kind of scuffle that had taken place between the intruder and Jack. Sadly, the intruder brutally stabbed Jack in the chest and the stomach repeatedly, around 39 times in total. The intruder, frustrated with Jack for not dying quick enough, I guess, they took something heavy to then smash over Jack's head, which killed him instantly. When Candy and her children returned to Jack's apartment around 4 in the morning, which is like, what are you doing? Well, whatever. So at 4 in the morning, they come back to the home and they find Jack, who is just wrapped up in a blood-soaked blanket and is just dead. Candy called the police immediately upon discovering her husband's remains, and when local law enforcement arrived at the scene of the crime, they knew immediately that Jack's murder was a crime of passion, and they knew this because of how many stab wounds there were. I mean, it was screaming, hey, this is personal. And I should have gone into a little bit deeper explanation, I guess, about how they knew that. It's very fascinating. They could tell if it's investigators and whatnot. They can tell if it's somebody who knew the victim just based off of how the attack went down, which I find fascinating. I'm losing my voice. What is going on? Not the point though, but they knew it was a crime of passion. So investigators quickly began interviewing or asking questions from the neighbors. And some of the neighbors had remarked that they heard like a panicked shouting happening and various thuds happening in the direction of Jack's unit. Sorry about that, little guy. One neighbor said that they saw like a dark-haired man in dark clothing fleeing the premises almost immediately after the commotion had stopped, but they didn't get a good look at who it was. So Candy on the other hand, informed investigators of Jack, his tendencies to take home strange men, and suggested that, you know, maybe this could have been an act of a jealous lover. So police, of course, took this into consideration and tried to track down any men who had personal relationships with Jack, but at some point early on in the investigation, law enforcement located Jack's personal diary. Yes. Inside this diary, they came across pages upon pages of just weird and like eerie comments concerning Candy and Melvin. So in this diary, investigators could tell that Jack was genuinely afraid of his wife and her lover, incestuous lover, I must say, that they might kill him for his money. This is what he's writing in his diary. So this alone was enough for investigators to start to focus their investigation on Melvin and Candy a little bit more. So back at Jack's home, crime scene investigators found bloody fingerprints on Jack's countertops. They run these bloody fingerprints through, you know, their system, and voila, baby, it matched Melvin. One of Jack's cars was stolen. One of them, you know. It was the one that Candy usually drove around. Anywho, so they find Jack's car near a local airport. It was reported stolen. So when they find it, they're like, okay, here it is. So I'm sure it was more than that. I feel like I'm making this more confusing. Stolen car, it was Jack's car. Now it was found near a local airport and was searched. And of course, like inside, they find a bloody fingerprint. They ran it through the system. Melvin. It was linked to Melvin again. Melvin, you're a little sloppy. As it turned out, Melvin had been seen in Miami over the same few days that Jack's murder took place. It only took a few days for police to locate and arrest Melvin for the murder of Jack. When word got back to Candy about Melvin's arrest, she hired the top defense attorney to represent Melvin. I mean, the best of the best. But police wholeheartedly believe that Melvin did not act alone. They believed that Melvin was working closely with Candy Mossler to murder Jack Mossler for his money. Shortly after Melvin's arrest, Candy was then taken into custody for her assumed association in her husband's murder as well. Candy knew she wouldn't do well behind bars. Locked up. No. It's not going to work for me. So she hired a team of lawyers to make sure she never served a day in jail. Now, for over a year after the murders, both Candy and Melvin were free on bond. Don't get me started. At the pair's trial, Candy and Melvin consistently asserted their innocence. The prosecution team presented a case showing Melvin and Candy wanted Jack dead so they could be together and inherit his millions. It was estimated that Jack's estate was worth over $200 million in gross value and $22 million in net value, over $1.6 billion gross and over $177 million in net value today. So a lot of money, okay? Like a lot of money. If you had $177 million, you'd be good for the rest of your life. The prosecution backed up their claim of an affair with photographs of Candy and Melvin that they had taken together. The couple, they seemed to travel a lot together and documented their trips with photos of them on ski slopes, at concerts, and in nightclubs. Just like taking pictures together wherever they went. So they brought these into the courtroom and they told the jury, look, this happy couple, look at them. Here is the motive. They wanted the money. They told the jury that Jack had recently learned of his wife's affair with her nephew. And in response, Jack was planning a divorce and dropping her from his will. Now, this sudden change of events is what caused Melvin to fly from Houston to Miami. He was seen driving Candy's white car around the time of the murder in the area. Then, hours before the time of death, Melvin was at this place called the Stuffed Shirt Lounge, which was a lounge bar area, but it was right by Jack's apartment, and he was spotted there. Melvin was. Before leaving, Melvin had asked the bartender for an empty bottle of Coke. The prosecution said that he left the bar and headed to Jack's apartment with the Coke bottle in hand. It's believed, or it was argued, that this was the weapon Melvin used to strike Jack in the head, an empty Coke can. Like the real glass Coke bottles, those are pretty hardcore. I think... Yes, that sounds about right. Then the killer used a knife to stab the victim 39 times. Candy's part in the murder was making sure that her husband was home alone. She had claimed to have a migraine and then insisted on taking the kids, the 4 children with her, to drive around for nearly 3 hours, 3.5 hours. She didn't go to the urgent care like she had said she did. She instead just drove around for 3.5 hours. They called witnesses who testified that Candy had spoken to them about trying to find someone to kill her husband. The prosecution is painting a picture that all signs point to Melvin and Candy. I mean, no ifs, ands, or buts. We got the motive. We've got witnesses who said that Candy was asking if someone could kill her husband. I mean, it's clear as day, right? The defense team came back and fought that the bloody fingerprints that were found in the home/car could have been there from days before. For all anyone knew. This was before DNA testing, so all they knew was that there was blood and like bloody fingerprints and stuff, but not who the blood belonged to. So they're trying to fight like, well, yeah, there's bloody fingerprints and stuff, but we don't know how it got there. Could have been left there from a couple days before. I mean, it's wild, you guys. It could happen. Candy took the stand testifying that on many occasions, she and her children had come home and found Jack involved with a male lover. The defense said that any one of the random men Jack picked up could have killed him, and it's not fair to blame it on Candy or Melvin. To you and I feel like, this is easy, right? Well, the jury took over 16 hours to deliberate, and they returned with a verdict. A verdict of not effing guilty. What? Yep, not guilty. They claimed that they found insufficient evidence to convict the couple of murder, despite all of the evidence that were presented to the jury, the diaries, the love affair, the motive, the witnesses. Not guilty. Now, the jury, they acknowledged their illicit love affair, but noted that the affair in itself did not mean that they were responsible for Jack's murder. All of the evidence presented at trial turned out to be far too circumstantial for any guilty sentencing. There we go. They just felt like it really didn't prove that they indeed did it. The media was reporting on all of this, and people were losing their shit because, like, oh, money, an affair, Jack being possibly gay, Candy having an affair with her nephew. When I tell you people were losing their shit, like they were losing it. This story was just like insane. And it got to the point where they had to shut the doors to the court hearing itself. It was just seen as too extreme, too sexual for people to handle. They would not allow anybody to like come in and whatnot. It was wild. Heads were exploding left and right based off of what I was reading and like hearing and stuff. So after her win in court, Candy did what she did best. She was like, you know what, everyone, I'm going to throw a party. So she threw a party celebrating that that they were found not guilty. God. Her children took one of the murder trial posters that had been around town to the guests and had them all like sign it as a souvenir. They framed it. Yay! As a result, Candy and Melvin walked free for a murder that many are positive they committed. Like Candy had hoped and dreamed for, she inherited her husband's estate and his banking business. She changed the name of the company to Candace Mossler Enterprises. What a shitty person she is. Wow. And just a year after winning their trial, Candy and Melvin split. But she went on to inherit her deceased husband's millions and even remarried in 1971 to a man named Barnett. But so strange, you guys. We don't know. She just has a wild life. Barnett, is it Barnett? You see, what happened was Barnett, he suffered brain damage the next year in a mysterious fall from the couple's mansion's balcony. And he suffered from some serious brain damage and was in a coma. And Candy was like, I'm out. Bye. Okay, so then in 1976, Candy's body was found in a Miami hotel room. She was dressed only in a lace robe and she had on a full face of makeup, as she always did. She had overdosed at 55 years old. Some sources say that she was 62 years old. Another source said she was 66 years old. And honestly, I didn't verify because I just felt like it was very fitting. How old was she? Nobody knows. You never ask a lady how old she is. Ooh. Melvin and Candy, again, they split. And when he found out that Candy had died, he did attend Candy's funeral with his hot new little boo thing. And then, at that point, he had become a flamboyant real estate developer in Houston. Oh yeah, he went on to have a very successful life. He was said to always dress head to toe in very expensive attire. He owned a huge luxury yacht. And by 1979, Melvin had built a fortune estimated to be worth $200 million. He also drew attention in the early 1980s by adding 23 feet to his 142-foot yacht, which was said to be one of the largest in the Western Hemisphere. Wow, Melvin, you're really doing it, Melvin. Groundbreaking. Melvin was like in and out of bankruptcy. He had filed bankruptcy a couple times, but then he would like bounce back. So something sketchy was going on. I don't know. And at the age of 68, Melvin was found dead at his home in Houston. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences said that the cause of death remained undetermined. That, my friends, is a story about Candy and Jack Mossler. And Candy's just, what do I even name? Poor Jack. Poor Jack. He seemed like such a great guy, and he totally just got taken advantage of by this devil woman. That's what I'm calling her, a devil woman. What happened to the 4 adopted children, you ask? Well, I don't know. I didn't look into it because just leave them alone. They've been through enough. I don't want, you know? What did we learn here, my friends? Well, if you are wealthy in this country, you can and probably will get away with murder. Isn't it fun? Stories like these, they get under my skin so bad. Ugh. If you have money, you could get away with anything. It's so effed up. And you could say, well, Bailey, this was from the 60s or whatever, the early 70s. Okay, well, let me find some news stories then that are very similar to this. Maybe not as like, you know, scandalous, but they're out there because I read them all the time. I like to torture myself. Ugh. That's how I feel. Thank you so much. I mean, talk about a wild story, you know? I just truly don't understand how they didn't. Yes, I do. Money. Let me know your thoughts down below. Anywho, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Let me know who you want me to talk about next week. Please, please, please make good choices out there. Be safe, and I'll be seeing you guys later. Bye.